What's that?
You've got Trisha on the line.
I sent you a different invite for another later one.
Okay, I'll try that one. Thanks.
All right, everybody, so we're going to call this meeting to order, the Standing Committee meeting of July 21st, 2020. It's 4 p.m. Adoption of agenda. Council, any changes? Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add the first action item to be CAO contract discussion, and that will be in camera. It could be the first action item for this evening.
Okay. First action item, CAO contract on camera. Okay, any other changes, council? Okay. Administration.
Yes, Mr. Chair, one change to remove the in-camera item, the first item, land matter, from the in-camera agenda.
All right. That is removed. Thank you. Okay, Councilor Nelson.
Move that we adopt the standing committee agenda for July 21st, 2020 as amended.
All right, and we'll call that question. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Councilor Nelson.
Actually, if we're doing minute with council here.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
So, understand typically we do minute with council, but I understand there was no submissions for minute with council today. Okay, so. Yeah.
Like to move that we go on camera?
All right. And
no break.
Okay, just a quick question. Councillor Ostashik is going to be a couple minutes late, but he can still join us. Okay. All right. For all those in favor, go in camera. And that's carried. All right. So now we go into in camera. You have to.
Yeah, and if we can get everyone to.
Yeah. Okay, so Emily, should I let them all?
So
We set up a separate Zoom for this one. So for those of admin that are still on, we're going to end this meeting, start the in-camera meeting, and we'll send an email around to advise you guys when to join back to this one, okay?
Yeah, which is no increased funding though.
Yeah.
It's
that schools always have too much money, don't they?
so much. Yeah, doubling the class sizes.
You're gonna have to make books some other way than writing the story on.
It looks like the stream has resumed.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to reconvene then to our first action item, and that is. Sorry, for a second here. Or I should say, yeah, our action item, Fortis Alberta franchise fee. Deals.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last fall, council requested that a report be brought back for discussion on available options for franchise fees and potential impacts of those options. At this time, Fortis Alberta and the town of Hinton have an electric distribution franchise agreement with a franchise fee percentage that can be changed prior to November 1st each year. The report that council's received for tonight summarizes the impacts of increasing, decreasing, or eliminating the franchise fee. Currently, the fees are received into general revenue and moved to reserves. Fox is here tonight to speak to the report and the recommended action, and we'd be happy to receive any of council's questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you, C. Olson. Council, any questions, discussion? This action item. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my one question is on page 4, just about how franchise fee revenues are utilized. And I do appreciate that this is more information than I think any other report in years. So I believe we're getting closer to, for the average person, including myself, to understand franchise fees and where the money is allocated. But are there any examples of past capital projects where the revenues from franchise fees have went towards?
Ms. Fox?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. So it's not specifically stated within a policy or any reserve policy where the franchise fee revenue would be allocated to a specific reserve. What we try to do is the total amount of reserve allocations, which far exceeds the franchise fee, we state that part of that, or the franchise fee revenue is used to contribute to the reserves, and the reserve contributions go to all different places. So it's not specified anywhere where franchise fee revenue is going, just that it is part of that reserve contribution. And part of the reason it's done that way is because it's not a consistent form of revenue that can always be relied upon. We don't want to have our operations rely on that revenue, as if council made a decision to remove that, you would either have to reduce services to keep the reserve contributions the same, or you would reduce your reserve contributions, which would severely impact the amount going to the reserves is already low. So that there's consequences either way.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ms. Fox. I guess then, just to clarify, because I had a few individuals who came to me kind of asking about, as an example, detailed service level standards for outages, restorations, repairs, maintenance. That's on page 5 at the top. As an example, we do not have any expenses that come from any of these examples. That's the document that is under the franchise agreement that states what they do, but we do not contribute any expenses towards any of these things. I wanted clarity on that.
Thank you, Mayor Michael, Student Council. No, so what I would say is that reserves are used in many different ways. One is to fund operating projects, which would be considered one-time operating projects is what we call them, or anytime we use reserves to bring into operations to offset operational costs. The other thing reserves are used for is to fund capital. So it's specifically going to capital projects, capital repairs and maintenance, planning, and development charges, and anything to address projects that might not be considered capital in nature. Because they go to all reserve accounts, or the funds can go to all reserve accounts, it could be considered to be used for many different areas within the town.
Thank you.
Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, again, it just, I'm pretty sure I understand, but just to also clarify, the percentage that we charge does not impact an individual's cost. And the way, I mean, it's not a user pay thing. If you use more electricity, you use more energy, you're not paying more, correct?
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. So firstly, I would say that the town charges a franchise fee that equates to $1.2 million.
Yeah.
Fortis uses a percentage basis to calculate, based on consumption, how much they're going to charge. Which is, it's a bit different language. The way that it reflects makes it look like we're charging a percentage. They're charging a percentage to their customers to equate to the value that they owe us for that. I do believe that the amount that Fortis charges its customers is based on consumption. Now, whether the rate that they charge to the customer is percentage based or a flat rate, I'm not 100%.
Just follow this through. And so I think the important part where I stand is I'm very pro user pay systems. Going to a full cost recovery with a volume based cost for waste management. I like that. If you use more, you pay more. But this isn't that. This is an income and expense. All of it is spread equally throughout the town. So to me, if we reduce this to 0 and increase taxation to cover that off, it would have the same impact on citizens. And to me, if it accomplishes the exact same thing as taxation does, it's more transparent to just do it through taxation rather than through a franchise fee that's kind of a number out of the air a little bit that we just choose. So, thank you.
Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to speak to that, and I was going to speak to it anyways, my understanding is that's not exactly how it's laid out. It's more in line with what Ms. Fox was saying. It's that it's based on consumption. So the more power you use, the more you pay as in terms of paying towards the franchise fee costs. And that's one of the reasons I actually like the franchise fee, because it is somewhat of a user pay. The biggest users of electricity share more of the load of paying the franchise fees. So the big industrial users that consume a lot of power contribute more to paying franchise fees than the residential homeowner who comparatively uses a fractionally small percentage of the power, so they pay a smaller percentage of the franchise fees. I guess to sum up, that's one of the reasons I support it. The bigger users pay more than the smaller users. And I'd be happy to have somebody verify it or tell me that's incorrect, but that was my understanding, is it's a percentage based on consumption.
Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Chair, through the council. And just to clarify Councillor Stashik's point, that from all the information that is provided to me and why I've recommended that you wait until the new information comes in September to make a decision is because they base the amount of estimated revenue that is paid to us is based on their consumptions. So the calculation that they use takes their consumption and calculates that out. So if their consumption changes, our revenues, they could say this year you're only getting $1 million based on our consumptions. And then we would have to say, okay, we've typically got 1.2, how are we gonna make up that extra 200? Are we gonna make it up by increasing the percentage to bring us the 1.2 we need? Or are we gonna find $200,000 elsewhere in our budget?
Councilor Magoon?
And I wasn't going to speak on that, but I think that's an interesting point. Franchise fees has been something that we've been talking about for a while. Had a lot of input from citizens in the community on it. And I think that right there highlights one of the key problems. I think one of the issues that we have with franchise fees is that, it's this wonderful revenue stream, but at the end of the day, the citizens are still paying, and you can't really know for sure how much you're going to have in this year's budget, until you're proceeding through the year itself. I guess the area of concern I have really centers around if we as a municipality transferred into gathering, this essentially revenue stream for the town through taxation, what is that impact going to have on different levels of taxpayers, right? Throughout the community, because I know what it looks like on my power bill right now of franchise fees. But if we move forward in a particular direction of taking more of this on ourselves, I really need to make sure that both our highest taxpayers and our lowest tax rate payers, that nobody's going to get overhit, if that's a good way of putting it, to a point where we say, oh, geez, we didn't realize it was going to have that impact on, the citizen while we were trying to make this more transparent. So I would love to see us transition over to collecting those revenues through general taxation as opposed to franchise fee. But if we do something like that, it has to be done judiciously. And I think we really have to work closely with administration to make sure that that doesn't overburden any segment of our population. Thanks.
Councilor Ruiz?
Me?
Yep.
So maybe I'm not understanding this correctly. 1% tax increase is based on about 125,000. If Fortis, if we're getting 1.2 million in revenue, and you want to move it over to tax base, that'd be over 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I am understanding that.
Okay. Councilor Nelson?
Yeah, I think the other gap of knowledge that I have with it is, generally speaking, if you're transacting extra money, so instead of it coming out of taxation or through taxation, we are charging Fortis, and then Fortis is charging customers. Each of those transactions likely has a cost of some sort to it, whether it's administration costs, whether it's taxes, taxes such as GST, if you take $1 of franchise fee revenue and $1 of general taxation revenue, when you get to the end, is it still $1 for both of them, or is it $1 for general taxation, only 95 cents for? And I'm putting out ideas. I don't know the answer.
Sorry, Mr. Vanna. I forgot you guys were behind me. I'm looking this way. Pardon me.
Sorry, trying to find the mute button. I mean, the way to look at it is that it's a user fee. So it's a little like we charge people on a user fee for water, for sewer, those type of utilities. It's exactly like that, except in this particular case, it's power. And because we don't actually control power, that's why we charge a utility franchise fee. So it is a user-based system, and I think that's, to try and say you want to make it up through taxation is not the best way to go, simply because it's on a user-based consumption basis, and people that are taxpayers aren't always the users. If you think of it that way, it's like water, right? You can be a water user, but you're not necessarily a taxpayer. So I think from that perspective, I think leaving it and charging a utility rate or a franchise fee is what most municipalities do in Alberta.
Thank you. Ms. Fox.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Vanna, for that. I think lots of times franchise fees just gets looked at from a financial perspective, and I know when I came into the town, it was like, hey, here, it's financial, bring this forward. But even in our leadership discussions and talking to development services just about the land use and the user fee component gets forgotten. And we focus mainly on that financial piece that looks like it's a downloading of taxation, which it actually isn't. The other really important piece to keep in mind is that because it's based on consumption, if you take a lot of the larger users, so you have your small general services, your oil and gas service, your general service, irrigation, farm, those big consumers of this, and then all of a sudden you take it to a property taxation charge, you have a residential and a non-residential tax rate. A majority of those taxes can't be split evenly based on now the bigger users of that power. So that gets downloaded to your residents, and we already have constraints with our tax split, putting pressure on our residents and less on business. Now you're going to create that situation again, because a majority of these users that are consuming a lot of this power is going to now get more evenly distributed to the residents to create the same dollar value. I can't guarantee that a resident isn't going to be paying 4 times as much. The user fee system, the franchise fee system is set up the way it is for a reason. It's just not widely understood why it happens, because people forget often about those other details and think it's a download.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually happy Mr. Vanna used that as an example. The services, that's my philosophical problem with franchise fees. I like that it's user pay. So a residential owner of a home pays way less than a big corporation. Great. So that concept is I support. But fundamentally, when you provide water or sewer, you have expenses. You're trying to do cost recovery for something that you're spending money on. Franchise fees don't have that. That's why I asked, what are our expenses? We're getting $1.2 million and we're not putting any expenses out. It's just to get money to pay for projects that are not related to this. That's the concept that I struggle with. Now, do I want to shift to taxation dollars right away? No, because that's a lot of taxation dollars. But fundamentally, there's something wrong. This is the only thing that I've ever heard of that you are trying to get money back for nothing. Because if we charge zero, Fortis would charge zero to the people, and nothing changes with our relationship and our expenses, to my knowledge. And that's why I asked the expense part. So maybe we have other greater problems, but fundamentally, it's odd that we are collecting revenue for something we have no expenses for. That's all. So it's just, I think the provincial government one day will deal with this. I don't think this will exist in 50 years or 25 years. Somebody will spend the time and fix this, but it's still odd that we're collecting money. And the last thing is, if that is the case, our residents and our big businesses are paying an extra 5% to the federal government for this, which was a point, you know, that I like. If we're just getting money, what's 5%? About 65,000 is going to the federal government from our community just for them processing this, really. So that to me, fundamentally, I'd like to justify this more and find a 4 or 5 year process in order to get off franchise fees and bring it back into taxation at some point. But maybe it's a problem for another day, but that's my final thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. CEO Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'll defer to Mr. Vanna first,
Okay.
and then I'll follow up.
Okay. Mr. Vanna?
Sure, just to maybe comment on the mayor's comments. What do we get for franchise fees, or why would we charge franchise fees? The thing about it is, it's also, we have road rights of way, we have coordination. So if we're doing a capital project, guess what? We need to coordinate with the utility companies, and a lot of times we're working around them. If we need to relocate a utility, then it's at our cost to relocate the utility. There is a fair amount of coordination and work that needs to take place, which is it fair for the taxpayer to per se to necessarily take it out of taxation? No, it's not. I mean, it's really, if the utility company is in our rights of way and we're trying to coordinate with them, then this franchise fee is a way to recoup some of our dollars for those extra costs. In a perfect world, if we could charge a franchise fee for other utilities, then that would also help us to try and recoup the dollars and the operational costs it takes to coordinate with the utilities in our rights of way.
Thank you. CEO Olson, and then Councillor Stashik, and then Councillor Magoo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was echoing Mr. Vanna's thoughts as well, and that we do have those rights of way, that we have municipal property that we're not actually able to use for any other purpose. Trails maybe, that sort of thing, but there isn't an ability to sell or develop that land.
Councillor Stashik?
Yes, a lot of the points that I was going to speak to have been spoken to by administration more eloquently than I tried to earlier. But yeah, it's basically a couple points though, that if this amount of revenue was collected through taxation, just because of the split, the way that it's split, and the fact that it's a user pay based on consumption, the big industrial users currently use such an exponentially greater amount of power than the residential users do, that by collecting it through taxation through our current rate structure, that would almost certainly superinflate what the percentage that the residential users are currently paying, and they would in effect start subsidizing those big industrial users, which I don't think is fair. I don't think our citizens should be helping to shoulder the cost of the franchise fees from and taking that burden off the big industrial users who are using all the power and who rightfully should be carrying the greater portion of that burden. And the other thing that I wanted to comment on was to the effect of the philosophical discussion about what is the town of Hinton providing that we're collecting fees on. Well, what we're providing is we're providing the land that the utilities sit on, that once the utilities are on them, can't be used for any other purpose. And a major power line utility that runs through our town could be 100 meters wide, several kilometers long. That's acres and acres of land that can't be used for any other purpose. And so I look at the franchise fees as being, a rent. We're charging rent for the purposes of putting your utilities on within the community, because the community deserves to be compensated for the fact that they can't use that land that's within the town boundaries of Hinton for any other purpose. You can't develop residential, you can't develop commercial, you can't develop anything on those right of ways. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Magoo, and then Mayor Michaels.
I'm good, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you, Mr. Vanna, for the cost of relocating the utilities. If it falls on us, these are the things I think we need to have. If we can explain this to the community, saying that monies are going to this and this, but we don't have that, because then I can say conceptually, the road right away is there's a value to that. I don't know what that value is. If we collect $13 million in taxations over 10 years, is that land worth that? I don't know. I think it's partially. But if there are other examples that what our expenditures are, I think it should be included in our reports, right? Like that should be the data that we can go to the public and say, your franchise fee that we vote on goes to this, this, and this, and we've never had that. That's sort of the issue. So I guess my question to administration I think it's October it's coming back, or November?
Hopefully late September.
Late September. Could we have some expenses from years past that go to that, or some examples, things of that nature for us to communicate to the public?
Thank you. Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. So what I was thinking as you guys were discussing this is that if I worked with Mr. Vanna, we could probably get this away from more of the financial pieces and more back to the land use report that would be beneficial to Council to understand what's being paid out. And I'll just look to Mr. Vanna for a nod if this is something that we can work together on, then to bring you that information to make it more understandable for Council and the public with that information. That's what we would look to do.
You're getting the nod.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, I guess my question for administration and Ms. Fox specifically, my area of concern still being that hyperinflation. If the town was to take that $1.2 million on and say, no, we're gonna go through general taxation. Is there any kind of high level modeling that doesn't require an arduous amount of work on administration's part that I can take to Joe and Jane Citizen and say, look, right now, the bulk of this energy and the percentiles are being paid out by, the bulk users, the business side of things. But if the town was to take this on, this is sort of how we would split up those costs. And this is the potential increase to your taxation that you would be looking at for us to just make up that 1.2 million. Is that possible that we have that sort of numbering? Because I know, like, when I sit down with citizens and they say, well, why aren't we paying this in taxation? Say, because the mill isn't going to be paying, their percentile that they are right now. We're going to have to take that number and divvy it across all the residents as well. So I hope that makes sense in the way I'm sort of posing that question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through to Councilor McCune. I believe that we could put something together at very high level.
Yeah.
It is hard for me to get a breakdown. I can see that a majority of the dollars from some of the information that Fortis provides me in regards to how they calculate is coming from non-residential. And it's broken down as some of those that I wrote out before, or had read out before with farm, irrigation, street lighting, yard lighting, small general service. That's a majority. Breaking that down, we might be able to do that on a percentage basis at fairly high level. I can tell you a majority would be industry and non-residential that would be getting downloaded to your residents.
Yeah, and that's.
And I could tell that, we could tell that from before, just coming up with an exact amount, we may be able to do that at a high level.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Council, any other discussion or questions on this action item? Is there any direction or anything that anybody can talk about? Councilor Magoo?
Just a point of information, and I think the mayor asked the same thing. We're going to see this again in September, correct? Okay. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay. Councilor Stashik?
I'd like to move the committee accept the Fortis Alberta franchise fee report as information and direct administration to bring back a report which includes the proposed distribution rates report for decision in the fall.
Thank you, Councilor Stashik. Any direction? Any
Just one
discussion?
second.
Oh, sorry.
Normally these are written up, they are not. Can we go a little slower?
Oh, sorry, yeah, I thought you had it.
I was pretty close. We got this
There you
far.
go, Carla's ready.
Really easy to copy there, I think.
Is there any discussion or debate on this? So I'll just give Ms. Way a moment to draft that. Councilor Nelson?
Well, she's I'm looking forward to the discussion in the fall. I learned more today about franchise fees and some of the discussion, and I understand more now than I have in however long we've been, 2.5 years. So I think the philosophical conversation can go in our heads for a little bit while between now and when we make this decision. So I appreciate that it's come to us now to let it sink in a bit, and probably have some different conversations with citizens as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mills. And if I would say too, I appreciate Mayor Michael's notion, because I mean, I know that this fee has been, deemed a hidden tax, a slush fund, various different, terms given to it. But I think given that information, that if we know where our money is going, we understand, what we're getting for, those dollars, I think is really important for our community, not only for us to understand it, but our community members to understand it. Because if they don't know what it's going for, that's what it's going to seem like. And I think having that information is going to be helpful moving forward, in the future as well, that maybe franchise fees is the best option based on, all this discussion that we're having. So, okay, good. All right, so, council, we have a direction on the table. The committee accept the Fortis Alberta franchise fee report as information and direct administration to bring back a report which includes the proposed distribution rates report for decision in the fall. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before we move on,
Yes.
just the motion has to reflect who made the motion.
Oh, yes.
Just want to make sure it's done.
You got that, Ms. Wade? Thank you. So Councilor Stashik made that, and it was carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, so, yes?
Could Heather bring that back up? I don't mean to be picky, but right after a report for decision
Oh, in the fall.
in the fall?
Thank you, Councilor Roos. All right, so our second action item then is on the remuneration policy, correct? All right, CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council received the revised remuneration policy at the July 7th standing committee meeting. And at that time, 2 versions of the policy, one which accomplished all additions, revisions, and clarification from the direction provided by council earlier in the year, was included, and one that incorporated all but the administrative task of completing all council timesheets. Through the discussion and review with council, council had a request that the term workshops be clarified and that be brought back in the revised policy that included all of option 2, so all of the additions and whatnot from that version to be brought to council for further discussion tonight. Ms. Wade had been working on this and accomplished those revisions. We're prepared to answer any questions that council might have tonight. The recommended action is that committee direct administration to bring remuneration policy number 052 to a regular council meeting for approval.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. All right, council. Any questions, discussion on this action item? Councilor Goon, then Mayor Michaels.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I guess I apologize because I was on vacation when this was first discussed. So just in reading through things with this exception style reporting, let me know if my read on this is right. So basically a councillor has their regular timesheets for the month. We work on the assumption that they've attended all the regular council meetings, and the exception report that they are responsible for providing once per month includes any meetings that they missed and any meetings, committee meetings, workshop meetings that they attended in addition to that. Is that my read on this as I was going through this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Thank
Yes.
you. That's great.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, no, the format makes sense to me. Thank you.
Mayor Michaels and then Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a concern with section 4.7, just the clarity of attending FCM. Before it was the mayor could go every year. Each councillor were allowed to go one. Now it's a bit more vague in, as it says, are advised to attend the annual FCM conference on a rotational basis due to high costs and the ability to stay within budget. within the policy, that to me, I don't know how to sort of understand that or define that if there are savings, all of council can go multiple times, or I'd like to, with the will of council, if there's an appetite to bring more structure on who can attend FCM and how often, and so yeah, so I have issues with 4.7.
Okay. Administration, Deputy Olson.
Thank you. I may look to Ms. Wade just to understand whether this is a section that had been changed from the previous policy, or if this is a new change that we.
I do believe most of the language was already in. We did try to bring more clarity around if the conference is closer and more counselors could attend because we're not spending as many travel dollars, that would be possible, but the intent was that the mayor also.
So may I follow up?
Yeah.
So I think we should add the verbiage that was in the old policy. It was a little bit more defined. Said the mayor would go every year and councillor could go one time per term. And I opened that to council. I don't know, maybe the appetite's changed, but at least we should define what our expectation is and not sort of tie it to something that's maybe difficult to really understand. So we don't have a reoccurring problem every year. Can we go? Can we send 2 this year? We don't know. So that's all. Thanks.
Okay, so I have Councillor Stashik. Is it on this point or this particular 4.7?
No, it's a different point, so if we want to defer to discussion around this point and then come back to me, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Nelson, is it on this point?
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Nelson?
I completely agree with Mayor Michaels on this. I think defining it clearly takes any politicization out of it. And I think that's important. And it's also important that, you know, if there's not a time where a councillor's gone once and no councillor go the next year, I think the cost savings achieved are also important. So I think it's fair and equitable and sensible that the mayor goes every year and each councillor has one opportunity within their term at their discretion to choose which year makes the most sense, whether it's what's on the agenda for that year, you know, maybe having more people go earlier in their term, which is what we've kind of looked to do, because there's a lot of value if it's 3 months before the end of your term and you're not running again. So I think the clarity is really important. And we have that understanding as a group, I think, but the next group might not have that understanding. And now you're trying to figure out exact budget costs, flights, and all those things. So the simplicity of how it was previously, even if it wasn't spelled out, I think is important to spell out in this policy. So thanks for bringing that up, Mayor Michaels.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and I'd like to add another caveat. I'll put forward a direction in a moment, but I wanted to see what the appetite of council was. If councillors can go one time in their 4 years, I think we should exclude the last year. I don't think to go the first 3 years, you should have the opportunity to learn and exercise what you learn at FCM. I think it should be done within. We understand things come up. You may not go in the first year due to work constraints, second year, third year, but I think 3 opportunities is good enough to go just before the election. Optically, I think that A doesn't look good. And I do value strongly that FCM does help you as an elected official with your networking and understanding your roles and responsibilities. So sooner the better. So that would be one form of encouragement to go in the first 3 years. If it was up to me, I think it should be really the first year, but I think 3 years at least demonstrates the intent of going and learning and exercising what you've learned. So
thank you. All right, so is there a direction?
I'll make a direction.
Okay.
I'll wing this. I'd like to direct administration to update section 4.7 to include that the mayor can attend the FCM conference yearly and that councillors may attend once in their first 3 years of that council term. And that's just a direction to get approval for administration to go back and word it the way they want. So then when it comes to us, it's conceptually, that's what I'd like in section 4.7. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Nelson?
Like to split it at the end. Yeah. And if I could speak to it, I don't know how I feel about that, especially with our term. And I know myself and I think other councillors delayed going to FCM the first 2 years because there was strong participation. And this year FCM was canceled. And if you have a member of council that's fully intending to run again, and I think they can make that calculation on their own. If I expend funds to go to a conference 3 months before an election, that's a political decision in a lot of ways. So, you know, I don't know what my decision would be, or other councillors that didn't have the opportunity to go this year in their third year because of cancellation. But I just don't know if this would be the right year to make that. So I'm happy to vote on the first one and support the first one, and then go from there on the second one. So, thank you.
All right. Councilor Wong?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm one of the councillors that was in that predicament this year. I was scheduled to go to FCM and it got canceled. But with that said, even though it impacted me personally, I can get behind both parts of this split. I think we had worked on the original wording ourselves as a group after our first year, and I like the idea of the mayor and one trip per councillor per term. And I do support the rationale of may attend once in their first 3 years of that council term. I understand what Councillor Nelson's saying, but I do believe that they will get another, if someone is running again and they get in, they'll get another kick in the can in the next term. So I'm going to be supportive of both aspects of this.
Okay. All right, so then the motion is split. We'll first decide on the first part of it, the committee direct administration to update section 4.7 to include that the mayor can attend FCM conference yearly. Any other discussion? And we'll call that the question.
Sorry. So the first one is saying the mayor goes every year.
Yes.
Correct. Second one is saying that the 6 councillors will decide, to go, 1 year, second year.
Right, but we're working on the first one first.
Yeah,
because it's split, and then we'll have a second direction after that. So.
Okay.
All right. So
Before it's called the question, Mr. Chair, just procedurally, does a motion to split the motion, is that debatable? It's just is. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so we'll call the first part to question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak on the second motion. I don't think I'll be supporting it. At the end of the day, I'm really just trying to consider the dollar and cents value. If you have 6 councillors and they each attend once, that's the value of 6 trips. At the end of the day, I don't really see, I think it's splitting hairs to, evaluate, are you splitting over 3 years or over 4 years? I think it's best to give each individual councillor the freedom to decide when is appropriate for them to go. Because further to that, having experienced this myself as well, work commitments also play into things as well. And I don't want to put that onto a councillor. I think they're, forgive the more down-to-earth terminology, they're big boys, they're big girls, they can make decisions for themselves. At the end of the day, if they're entitled to one trip, when they choose to go is their choice. So I don't see the need to regulate that. Thank you.
Grace?
Thank you, sir. I would not support this either. I feel going their first, second, third, or fourth year. And another thing, if the conference is in Vancouver, that could possibly open it up to a councillor going more than once in their term, if it's near. So I would not support this.
If I may, to question to that, and Councillor Stashik, so if we were to go to more than one, the second time going would come out of that professional development fund, right, of that person, councillor. Does this particular, if we make this part of this policy, where does the funding come from for that counselor to go? Does it come from their professional development, or does it come from another fund? I guess, looking at, yeah.
Sorry.
Ms. Fox?
Okay, thank you, Chair, through to council. Right now, there is, the professional development, would be separate from the FCM, allotment to go.
And if I may, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just to add to that, I'm trying to recall what the previous wording of this area was, because it was discussed by council previous in their term, and I believe that this exact scenario was included in that discussion and was incorporated into the change that was made at that time. So if we can bring back a version that has that previous wording, maybe that will provide some clarity on some of those pieces.
Because if I recall, that was if I as a counselor wanted to go to a second one, then it would come out of my own professional development, and anything over that would then be out of my own pocket, right? So it would come out of that. So so even if it was closer, like Councilor Race is saying, when the person drives to Vancouver, whatever, had already gone, they're more than welcome to go as long as it comes out of professional development. So all this is saying though is that you have the opportunity to go in the first 3 years. You know, if you don't go in the first 3 years, then I guess this then negates the 4th year. So, Ms. Fox, and then Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go, I think because Ms. Wayne wrote the policy and she had her hand up, but we can't necessarily see her. I'd like to go after her, if that's okay.
Yes, by all means, sorry.
Thank you, Chair, through to the member of council. The intent of that language had been to give you guys the flexibility to use not your personal professional development fund, but the FCM funds to go if, for example, it is in Vancouver and those savings can be made. And it had been intended that you come back to council to say, oh, it's close, so we're going to send 3 this year. Is there interest in going? This is the amount of budget. These are the people we can take, so that you wouldn't have to take it out of your professional development. Now, let's say that 3 of you go and one of you really wants to go and see a certain speaker. Then at that point, you could still elect to go by taking it out of your professional development. And that was the intent of opening that up for you guys, to give you more ability to attend more if possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor, oh, sorry, Ms. Fox now, and then Councilor Stashik, and then Race.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure too, in this motion, the word may means optional. So if you, as mayor and council, want to insist they go at least once in their term, I would suggest must, or a stronger word within the policy, so we know that your intent is that they have to go, or is this optional?
Mayor Michaels to speak
I'll speak to that,
yeah.
I like the word may, unless there's a will of council. That's pretty strong in saying that we must. I do appreciate you bringing that up, because Ms. Fox bringing that up, because I think it's a valid point. Do we want that? I'm in the position right now. I'm fine with just may. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a couple things. I'm happy that Ms. Wayne had the opportunity to speak, because that confirmed my recollection of it too, was that the option for other council members to go was based on the amount that was budgeted for that year and the full utilization of that budget, not that it was to come out of the professional development account. With that said, though, the motion that's before us, I won't be speaking in favor of it. I'm happy with everything other than the first 3 years. I think that the option to attend one time during the course of the term, I'm fine with. I just don't think that it should be limited to only the first 3 years. If the opportunity is unavailable at some point in those first 3 years, I don't think that the opportunity should be gone just because it's falling in the last year of the term, and that's the only time that the counselor is able to attend. So I won't be supporting it as worded. If it's amended or a different one, I'd be happy to support, but with the 3 years there, I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stashik. Councilor Reese.
Thank you, sir. And here's my concern. Let's just say that next council, none of us get in. So a new council is in, they weren't at this meeting tonight, and they go, you know what, July 21st, council made a direction that councillors may attend once in their first 3 years. Okay? And they go, council said that, they made the direction. So I cannot support this.
Councilor Magoon?
I just wondering if the mayor would accept a friendly amendment to essentially read that councillors may attend FCM once in their term. Would you accept that?
And I'm fine with that. For the sake of time, I've done a little bit of math in my head, and I'd be okay to just move along. I still see the value in going as early as possible, but if council wants that flexibility, this isn't when I'll die on the hill. Thank you, Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. So we got direction, the committee direct administration, nope, where did it go? Oh, yeah, the committee direct administration to update section 4.7 to include councillors may attend FCM in their first
Once in their
first term.
Just once in their term.
In their term. Yeah.
Ooh, first term back.
Yeah. Once in their term. Mayor Michaels, are you happy with that?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. All right, then we'll call this one the question. All those in favor? And that's carried, and all those opposed? And that is carried 6-1. Grace against.
It's carried.
Carried.
Oh, it's carried, yeah.
Ah.
Carried. Did I say defeated? Okay, good. I did. Good. Excellent. And Grace was against.
You're gonna be lonely in that 4th year. None of us hanging out with you.
No,
This is-
this doesn't go for it.
We changed it, so it's not in the first 3.
That's all.
You.
Oh,
All right. So back to, off this topic, back to Councillor Stashik, to the remuneration policy as a whole. Yes.
So long and early.
Yeah. I didn't forget. I didn't scratch your name off. You're welcome.
Let me scroll back. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this takes us back to even earlier in the meeting when Councilor Magoon asked for clarification on the exception reporting. And I think that highlights one of the challenges I see with the exception reporting is it's confusing. And if we're going to have to go through the trouble of having to report on the council committees that we're attending and also council appointed committees that we're attending, I don't see where the potential savings in time or effort comes in reporting that we attended the regular and standing committees of council as well. And there's an opportunity for some confusion and mistakes to be made if we're filling out that basically amounts to 2 reports, and one's an exception report that I did not attend these meetings, but I did attend these additional meetings. And to me, it's just simpler to, it would be simpler for me just to keep with the current reporting system that we have, where we report all the meetings that we attend during the month as part of the remuneration form.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik.
Thank you.
Ms. White?
Yes, thank you, Emily. See, also I'm good. Thank you. Through the remainder of council, I clearly misinterpreted Councillor Magoon's question earlier. So all the meetings that you attend regularly, for example, these ones, Ms. Anderson typically takes record of who is here. So if you did not attend, you would not have to report on that. In Schedule A, it shows you what is part of just your regular duties as council, and then the bottom portion as well. So you would only report on, let's say you went to FCM, only then you would report that. We will track for you that you attended regular meeting, standing meeting, and then if Councillor Magoon, for example, goes to a golf course meeting, he needs to report on that because we're not aware of that.
Can I follow up then?
Yeah.
So I'm not really following what the exception reporting is then. What are we accepting? What report would we be accepting? And that's accepting within.
Yeah.
So it's exceptions.
Right, so what would be the exceptions?
The exceptions would be, so we do typical reporting, which is you came to regular, you attended standing, and we had a special meeting tonight. If that's all you attended this month, that would be tracked and you would be paid your remuneration for those meetings. If you attended something outside of that, that let's say you wanted to take something out of your professional development and go to a course, you could be paid for that time by submitting an exception report as a meeting.
So I have myself in queue, and it was about, you're okay. I guess the biggest thing for me was, and the question that came up, and I know Councilor McGoon, you've mentioned this in the past, with regards to the question of whether, we have 2 meetings a night, right? We have this meeting and this meeting, and we've ironed that out. At the time, because we hadn't ironed that out, I could see the flavor that, administration do the regulars and the standing. Now that we've adjusted that in this policy and made that clearer, personally, I don't see the need to ask administration to do that for me. I think that with that clarity on that, to keep the things the way they are, that we put in our own standings, our own regulars, and then report on our different committees, I feel it solved that problem. And from what I understand, it adds about a couple of hours of administrative time to go with this particular version. Am I correct? C. Olson?
I don't know if it's a couple of hours, but there is administrative time in compiling, and I think there was some concern from our administrative assistant about timeframes, exceptions to that sort of thing for the exceptions report. If something came in a little bit late, making adjustments and a little bit of concern about managing that portion. However, we were willing to give it a try and then to report back to council if there's any concerns or that. So yeah, there is a little bit of additional administrative time and maybe a little bit of worry to get it right.
Yeah, I guess I see that has been solved, and all we're doing then is still doing our regular reporting of council committee meetings that we've done. We're just not putting in our standing and regulars, and I don't see the reason why we just can't continue to do that now that the wording is much more clearer, because I know there has been some confusion over the time. Is it 2 meetings? Is it 1 meeting? Is it whatever, right? So I personally don't see the need for this, exceptions, and to keep it the way it is, and reduce some of that administrative time and maybe confusion as well. So Councillor Nelson and then Councillor McGoon.
Yeah, I don't really like the hybrid model either. I think it's an all or nothing thing. Either we're filling it out or administration's filling it out. Mm-hmm. And I think same thing with the clarity that we've achieved through the policy with a few different things. I think we've eliminated, because it happened a lot in our first couple of years where we would have 3 councillors submit timesheets with one thing and some with the other, and that creates an uncomfortable political environment when people are filling out different things for the same meetings. To me, if we're going to administration doing it, they're doing the whole thing, and it's based on us submitting a workshop summary. Like, we'd be submitting all of that as part of the council agenda, which we're doing that too. To me, the best thing to do right now is to go forward with us filling out the whole sheets. It takes us 3 minutes. It's not a big deal. And if a year from now we think, we figured out this committee reporting thing really well, we know when we're submitting it, and maybe the best practice for the next council would be for administration to fill out the timesheets correctly. But I don't know that there's value there. If we're going to be doing anything with our timesheets, we may as well do it all, because to include our honorarium in the 2 standing committee meetings takes a minute. So I just don't see the time savings from us and the time expense from administration being in parallel. Thank you.
CEOs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a reminder to council that this policy does come back for an additional review with the committee in the spring of next year. So we can try out what's here and then reassess in the spring.
Okay. Councillor McGoon and then Councillor Stasha.
Yeah, and I suppose though, my initial concerns still haven't been addressed if we stick with what we're doing presently, because I think it still puts administration into a potentially awkward political situation. I mean, consider this: if we had a time clock, if we were 1950s school, we'd roll in, we'd grab our time card, we'd punch it. There's no cheating the time clock. Whatever time you walked in, that's the time you walked in. Whatever time you walk out, that's the time you walk out. We don't have that. See, what we have is a situation where I, as a counselor, if I'm trying to curry economic favor, there's nothing that requires me to track my hours the same as yours, except that Wendy, she sends us an email and says, oh, geez, I see you didn't claim this meeting on such and such a date. Do you want to do that? No, I don't. Because I want to be able to go to the public and say, I cost you less as a counselor than Joe and Jane did. Don't you rather have me up there who's charging you less than them? See, that's a political game. And we can all have the best of intentions, but that can happen both inadvertently and intentionally. So that's my concern. And I realize it requires just a little bit of extra work on administration's part. But then it's in black and white. The meeting started at 4:00, it ended at 8:02. Everybody around the table has that exact same time. That's honest, right? That's clear cut. And now it's up to you to claim your own meetings above and beyond that. But I mean, again, we can't do everything for you. So again, I realize, it's not about divvying up the task. It's about, according to the outside public, what is the most transparent and the most honest. So that's my concern around this. There's no gaming that system, right? That's my concern. So I stand by that. I'll support, of course, whatever the decision of council is when we get back to this. But there's a deeper concern there than simply the number of pieces of paper that we submit.
Councillor Stashik, and then Councillor Nelson, and then I have myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, no.
I didn't know. Councillor Wong looked at me, so his response was in there, so I didn't know what was going on. So, no, go ahead, Councillor Stashik.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
Oh, well, no, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to make sure you were ready. I may need some help. I would like to move that committee direct administration. That's not really direction to administration. The committee recommend, or the committee direct council. Yes. To continue completing council timesheets as per current practice. I'm more than open to revision of that because it's off the cuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik.
Oh, can I speak to it quickly?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think as Councillor Nelson said, it's kind of an all or nothing thing. If we have to do reporting anyway, we might as well just report everything that we're attending. And as far as concerns about, not claiming for appropriate times and not claiming for meetings, and I mean, I think if a councillor chooses to not claim for a particular meeting that they attended to, they're not really acting in good faith in their role as an elected municipal official. And if they're claiming for time that's beyond what should be allotted for the times of the meeting minutes have the start time and the end time of every meeting. It's easily provable if it was a 4-hour meeting or if it was a 4-hour and 10-minute meeting. So it's the concern about gaming the system isn't huge to me. And I just prefer to keep status quo, let the responsibility for submitting the timesheets fall to the individual councillors as it is currently. Thank you.
I had you, Councillor Nelson, in queue. Is it to this?
Specific to this. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the direction itself is probably to bring an amended policy to council, but as far as the concept of it, I agree, and I think the other part is going through my head and how I work from a process standpoint. I also don't think that administration could pay us based on the minutes until the minutes have been approved. And the minutes aren't necessarily approved for 1 week or 3 weeks or 5 weeks after the meeting too. So from how my brain works, we would have to approve minutes before we could. So same thing. I think see where this goes. We've clarified the things that need to be clarified, and I think it'll work better than it's worked in the past. The ambiguity will be gone, and I think we'll be just fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I had myself, but Ms. Fox, did you have? Nope. Okay. And I just, I guess for myself, and I hear what you're saying, Councilor Magoon. I guess I'm just thinking it's one thing about the meetings, but it's the committee meetings too that aren't, you know, you could do the same thing with the committee meetings because there is no minutes, there is no, I'm in this, you know, so I think that it, as Councilor Sasha said, it's on the individual councilor. I hear what you're saying and I realize, and I, you know, whether it's been done in the past, I don't know, but the fact is, I think that, you know, that said something about yourself as well too. So, and the public's aware of that. So I'm going to speak in favor of this as I spoke before. I think, you know, the clarity is there now on some of the confusion over meetings and some of the discrepancies there. So I'd like to keep it a status quo with myself as well. So thank you. And Councillor Sasha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to clarify the wording, I guess it could be that something to the effect that committee direct administration to amend version 2 for council continue, I think. Does that make sense? Look to administration for some advice, make sure that makes procedural sense.
Can I add up the procurement policy?
Remuneration.
Remuneration.
Well, that's the right one, right? Yes.
Remuneration. Yeah. Stay out of my procurement policy.
To make a motion to rescind the procurement policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. All right, council, so we have direction. Any other further discussion on it? And I'm going to call this the question that committee direct administration to amend version 2 of the remuneration policy for council to continue completing council timesheets as per current practice. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that's carried 6-1.
MAG-UHN.
All right, so back to the remuneration policy discussion. Any other matters of this policy anyone has any questions or discussion on? Seeing none, Councillor Nelson?
The committee direct administration bring policy number 052, version 2, as amended by committee to a regular meeting of council for approval. Number 2. And if I could speak to it, I think we've actually done a really good job with this. We've cleaned it up. It's gotten some good thought. I think the last couple things, when they come to regular, will be ironed out quite well. And I'm just really happy to eliminate the ambiguity that we've had for 2.5 years. And I'm looking forward to a clear policy. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson, any other? All right, so I'm just going to wait until Ms. Way brings it up and then I will. Add Councillor Nelson to that, please. All right, so we'll call the question then, that committee direct administration to bring policy number 052 as amended by committee to a regular meeting of council for approval. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. All right, any other further discussion on this action item before we move on to our next? Actually, no. Our discussion item is next, correct? Discussion. All right, our action items are then concluded. So we're going to move on to information items. There's no discussion items, information items. Community Peace Officer and Protective Services Bylaw Service Level Review. C.E. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last month, administration received notice that there would be a vacancy in one of the 3 CPO Community Peace Officer 1 positions. At that time, I guess earlier in July, council requested that the hiring for the position be postponed until a service level report could be presented and reviewed by council. The report that's attached to the agenda provides the background on the bylaw and community peace officer program, as well as an overview of the municipal bylaws and provincial acts that the CPOs enforce. The third CPO position was requested last year, summer of 2019, to maintain the service level that had been established. Additional support was needed to offset some substantial overtime costs and to meet community's expectation for response time and enforcement. In 2020, municipal CPOs, did the bulk of enforcement for the provincial and municipal restrictions during the pandemic, as well as managed the regular tasks. Changes in working loan legislation for CPOs mean that for certain calls, 2 CPOs are required to respond. Within the report, I just want to identify there are a couple of lines that were included from an efficiency and effectiveness organizational review report prepared by MNP in 2018-2019. And recognize that Council has not had an opportunity to discuss this report publicly. However, we've reissued the agenda this morning and included some of the relevant sections that were related and cited regarding the CPO program and the capacity and resources to aid Council in their discussion and make this a little bit more transparent. So appreciate that that this was reissued late this morning or the afternoon. So the report, along with an independent review of the services by the previous CAO, discussed the resourcing and capacity issues that we're seeing in this area. But it also includes that the level of service is high for our community. The MNP report made some recommendations that did include adjusting service level or recruiting for additional support, seasonal support. So including that information just to kind of support that discussion. Sorry, just move on. As this report, it's meant for an information item to support Council's discussion on the service level and take a look at what we have and what we're doing. Chief Martins is on the Zoom call to help in answering any questions that Council might have. And as this is an information item, the only recommended action tonight is for Council to accept this report as information. Thank you.
Thank you, City Olson. Council, any discussion, questions for administration? Councilor Nelson.
Just from a procedural standpoint, if we accept it from information that allows that position to move forward and be hired, correct?
That's right.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Magoo.
Yeah, just procedurally, because we were sort of spitballing potential solutions and options. I think, would it procedurally be possible for us to get an understanding of what the reduced service levels for 2 positions would look like? And then, if it was the will of Council, to proceed through this year's budgeting for 2, but to maintain that position, to hold it open until the subsequent budget year. And then we can make sort of a final decision using the interim year as a bit of a trial to decide, do we like that reduced level of service, or do we see that people were screaming over the next, budget year, saying, no, we need more people in bylaw, so you guys need to make the funds available there. Is that a possibility?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think with the content that's included in the report, we would be looking for some direction from Council on what that reduced service would look like. There's some suggestions that eliminating overtime, that was one of the main reasons for a third CPO to be brought into that department because of burnout, because of the community's expectations on response time. If there's a decision by Council to reduce that service, that would be where we'd be looking for movement first. So eliminating any overtime, potentially weekend calls, that sort of thing. So there would be an impact to the community and making sure that there's some communication around that that would explain why they're seeing what they're seeing. As far as through budget, so that would be a decision to reduce those service levels, not to hire this third position, and to continue reviewing that through the budget process with a bit of time to see how the community and Council's responding to that reduction. That is a possibility. I we'd just be looking for some direction, I think, from council. The services are detailed. If there's anything in particular that council has questions on, about how much time it takes or what the impact would be in eliminating it. I spoke to the hours as being kind of the primary piece of that, but open to council's questions for clarity on what things look like right now.
Thank you. So I had my cell. Oh, sorry, Mr. Martins.
And I guess further to that, just to give council a little bit of heads up to, I know I spoke to it just in a one-liner, but even over the last month, we'd be looking at going back to the two. Just over the last month of not having the third, we're averaging about 15 calls per week at this time through the evening and on the weekend that we're not able to take because that third officer isn't in place currently. So this also then puts more pressure on the two officers when they come in for their shifts on Monday and Tuesday morning, that they're going to have to now deal with the calls from Friday evening and Saturday and Sunday. So they're playing a lot of catch up. So I'd just like council to be aware of that since that position has been vacant for about the last month, we have seen on average about 15 calls per week.
I have myself and then Councillor Waugh. I guess and I guess this is specifically to Councillor Magoon's, some of the comments that he made is, yes, I've heard from some of our citizens that why do we have three, but I've also heard from a lot more people saying, bylaw is not available. It takes a long time, but I've seen or heard very little about that since we got our third person. And I see the numbers alone, in 2019, 2209 calls for service. And then already in 2020, as of July 1st, we're at 2,090 calls. We're looking at almost potentially doubling if it continues to look like this. And to ask, I think, two members to respond to that many calls. I do have a question though, and this is to administration that probably goes to Ms. Hope. But what are the risks of, before we make that decision of council and on service levels, but what are the risks to the organization having only two people, not just to the service levels, but sick times and all. I see two people, not a good number, in a lot of different ways, whether it's holidays, whether it's whatever, but what are the risks that we have?
Thank you. It is spoken to a little bit in the report, but we're really facing two people who are close to burnout. They're not able to take vacation. Even if they're not working overtime, as Mr. Martin said, when they come in on Monday and Tuesday, there's that extra push, there's that extra pressure, there's that extra workload to try to get done. So work intensification. If someone is, you see increased sick time. We haven't seen it with this group because they've been very dedicated, but you can only push people so far.
Okay. Yeah, if I may, and just to follow up on is that, my only my concern is like I said, is I think that, again, we have a number of bylaws, I got you, Councilman, a number of bylaws that we're asking them to enforce. And to go back to those bylaws and start to pick apart what services do we want and when do we want them, I just don't feel comfortable doing that with the conversation I've had with community members. In fact, they still want to see more. They want to see more enforcement in regards to a lot of different ways, whether it's to parking, whether it's to, different violations that are happening. So despite them being happy or what seems to be with the service already, but still would like to see more, in regards to proactive ticketing and things of that nature. So I just don't see that two can fit that bill. And I think it's been proven already, based on the report we saw and based on the comments that I've had from the citizens. So thank you. Councillor Waugh and then Councillor Magoon. And Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for admin. When this third position was originally posted back when there was a vacancy, It was posted as a temporary, was it not? Or as a, were the applications that were received based on that premise or on a full-time gig?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll defer to Fire Chief Martins as well, but it was posted as a maternity leave coverage or paternity leave coverage to have somebody in place during our peak season, as well with the unknowns of COVID. It was something that we were looking to maintain that level of service, I guess, in the 3 CPOs. It changed once that formal notice was given. But as far as timelines go and when that was changed and what we've received, I would defer to Ms. Hope or Mr. Martins to fill in those blanks.
Martins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the council. Yeah, I echo what CEO Olson said. It originally came in to us as the paternity leave. And then it was a temporary to help, again, that burden coming off of COVID and just the regular, no essential service had taken holidays. So we have individuals now with stacked holidays and bank time. So it was to help out for the paternity leave as well for the holidays coverage. To go back to Councillor Hawes's a little bit question, even currently, if we keep at the level, if we go back to the level with 2, we'll probably have a good portion of the rest of our summer and into September where we're down to 1 officer because of holiday and bank time from these 2 taking their time, and probably closer into October and early November. So I just wanted to make sure council's aware of that. Staying at the 2 is going to be even more challenging with the bank time of holidays and bank time. So once we were aware that this individual had the new position, he was very proactive in giving us that date, which then quickly turned into us looking for the full-time coverage, being that we had to interview, possibly have someone move here. And again, now we're halfway through the summer. So I'll leave it at that.
Good follow-up.
Yeah, please.
The reason I asked that is because I was against the 3rd position when it was brought forward last summer. I didn't want to increase the staffing in that department until we had better understanding of service levels and until council had a chance to own those service levels. I'd hate to see it decrease down to 2 without us having that same understanding. So my proposal would be, or I'd like to float this idea, is it plausible to have this as a 1-year contract or something of that nature to allow for a more informed community discussion and council consideration of what we can do to have a service level in a department that could be maintained with 2 officers. So that would allow us to transition down eventually through the budget process to get back to 2 community peace officers, but not do it in a way that puts our current staff at risk, puts them at risk of further burnout, and thins out our department anymore without a more detailed discussion of what we want to see as a service level change. Thank you.
So, if I may, are you looking just for discussion on that?
I just wanted to
making direction? Or?
I just wanted to have a discussion on it first. There's no formal motion as yet.
Okay. So, and the rest that are in queue, is it pertain to any of what Councillor Waugh has proposed, or can we go to a separate conversation?
Let everyone get their own ideas out there. I want to hear what everyone has to think before it goes
Okay.
to the board.
All right, Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious, when the municipality had one bylaw officer, what was our procedure for dealing with holidays and days off time back then? And because honestly, I can't even remember.
Mr. Martins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the council. So when it was the 1 officer, obviously the numbers were around only 300 incidents. I think 245 was what the only number that we had on on file for the 1 year for contacts from that officer. There still was an admin that took calls, and I guess sort of a dog catcher, so to speak, or an animal control officer that was still around kind of on an hourly basis through the week, or on call basis. And then any other calls went to the RCMP. The challenges of going to the RCMP once you have a level of service established and going backwards is now the expectation of the public and to enforce our municipal bylaws. The RCMP just don't have that knowledge of our bylaws, and it's a priority ranking for them, which I would hope that they're dealing on things that are more important, and leave the smaller municipal bylaws to our community peace officers. So it was forced to them, but very low priority for them to deal with any of our bylaws. And it took a while for some of the stuff to be dealt with.
So just additional clarification. So Chief Martins, just, let's say our one officer back then had 2 weeks of holidays saved up, and they went on 2 weeks of holidays. For that period of 2 weeks, any bylaw issues were shunted over to the RCMP and or were saved up until they returned at the end of their holidays. Is that how that worked?
Yeah, so that is correct. So if anything could be dealt with administratively, obviously we would try to deal with it administratively over the phone. But the RCMP would deal with what they could, and if not, it waited. And sometimes, it's a long expectation for people to wait 2 weeks to have something dealt with. If when they're complaining, it's urgent. And I think that our expectation is this is our level of service, and we should provide that, not hurry up and wait. We only enforce when we need to.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, I too, we talked about the service levels that have been established, but we really haven't ever established them. The other kind of thing that I don't necessarily understand, that to me is not the conversation for tonight, but of a broader service level conversation within that department. In 2016, the photo radar revenue was $2 million. That was the budget, and there was a position hired to support that. We're now at 400,000, so an 80% decrease in a program that we have a staff member doing that. And I understand what that staff member, like the position has changed throughout the years, but to me, having that position be a bylaw officer that can provide that flexibility, and probably not a CPO one, but the lowest level CPO, now that person, could hop in to cover a holiday, to cover an overtime, and build in the flexibility to that department. That I think it's more of a flexibility and nimbleness issue than it is a personnel issue in some ways. And so to me, it's the overall department is, do we want less peace officers? Do we want a higher level of service? Do we want, it's how we divvy up the whole department. And I think a flexibility of having a CPO level 2 or 3, whatever it is, as that support position could give that flexibility where it needs without adding an entire new position. I'm guessing that new position would be, or if that's a bylaw position, it would be a different pay scale. But it just, I don't know, something I struggle with a little bit, and understanding very few municipalities may have that position. So I'm not, food for thought. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rees?
Thank you, sir. So in 2014, we took over bylaw, and we took it over because lack of space, municipal management of the program, and staffing issues. When I don't know who to look at. When the RCMP had it, was it under their umbrella, the bylaw people?
Sorry.
Sorry, and I'll defer to Chief Martins in a second. I believe it was always part of the municipality, though it was housed in the RCMP space, so still managed by municipal staff, but housed over there. So it was a lack of space over there, and it moved at that point.
Okay, so
if there's anything further that Chief Martins had to add. Okay.
So they were situated over there, but it did fall under emergency services. All right, thank you.
Okay. I have myself, and I got I guess a couple of questions, but so my question to comparison to the bylaws that we currently service, so the planning and development fees and the charges, is this something that falls under the category of peace officers in other communities? Is this something that's in addition to our current peace officers? Just, because I mean, that is it's part of their municipal legislation, but do they have other personnel that does that in particular, for example, in other municipalities? Seals?
I would defer to Chief Martins on that. He is likely more familiar with the municipal comparators.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the council. Yeah, so other communities do a lot of similarities to what we're doing. Development services or corporate services, they have their process of how they roll out notices for collection, or sending out notices that people are late or behind. But once it gets to a certain point, that's when it comes over to our side on the enforcement side of things. And that is either the hand delivering of the letters, moving forward with action on the property, whether that's orders, or it's actually just physically getting in front of somebody. For safety of our staff, we don't want administration driving around, knocking on doors, chasing people down. That's why we have community peace officers. And it's similar across the organization on that part.
Okay, thank you. If I may too, when we have calls for service, just to clarify, are those calls for service that are specifically to our municipal legislation, to our bylaws, or do those calls for service also include the provincial acts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, through the council, they're for everything. I think there's a little bit of confusion too. We also have a traffic bylaw. So in the traffic bylaw, there's lots of stuff that mimics our the provincial act. So when people are calling, we get calls on regular bylaws that the town has, and then on some that mimic the province's bylaws. And we have the ability and flexibility to use either legislation, either acts, depending on what we're doing. So like, parking complaints, we normally use our municipal bylaws. With a parking complaint under a municipal ticket, we received 100% of the fines. If we write a provincial ticket, then we receive less money when it's on a provincial ticket. There are different ways to go for enforcement. A provincial ticket is a little more compliant. So in the end, it does get you. Whereas our side for a bylaw ticket would go through our finance department to recoup that cost if you didn't pay. So it's kind of all over. We have complaints for speeding in residential that falls underneath Traffic Act as well as our traffic bylaw. We have unsightly properties that they deal with. So it's all over the map. But definitely, it's a lot of it is complaint basis for them.
And if I may have just one more, and that's the Councillor Waugh's proposal or thinking about a contract position. And I guess my question to administration on that is, currently it's difficult to find potentially someone who's already trained to move into that position. As I understand, the last position was the training needed to happen, and then so I guess the question is that possible? Knowing that we may potentially have to train the individual in a contract position, would that fit that service? So, Seals.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll defer to Ms. Hope in a moment, but that is correct. last time that this was posted, it was difficult to find qualified candidates to move forward with. And with a relocation component, the decision was made to move forward with a candidate that was local, train that candidate and have them be part of the team. This is also an impact to, in the MNP report, it does make a recommendation to seek seasonal support, and that's I guess a complication of that as well, to bring somebody in every year for that seasonal role. There's relocation, right now there's an unexpectedly deep candidate pool for this recruitment. That's not typical of a position like this. So I don't know, to answer the question about the contract position, if that would mean reposting the position because the terms have changed. So that might be a consideration as well. And then I would defer to Ms. Hope if there were any other considerations in considering that.
Thank you. Ms. Hope?
Hi, thank you. Ms. Olson really encapsulated everything I wanted to say. It's not a small amount of training that they have to go through. It's only offered at certain times of the year where there's no guarantee that we could get someone in the training and actually boots on the ground in time to fully be able to do the job. And people don't always relocate just for a year and then know that the job is over. So that's just not an option that I think would be viable or sustainable, or that the town would really get its bang for its buck, so to say. Mr. Martins wants to add some stuff.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the council. I'd like to just touch a little bit more on Ms. Hope's comment about the training, just so council's aware of the changes in legislation. So the bylaw program, or even Councillor Nelson's comment earlier about having a bylaw assist, there is no more level 2 CPO. It's strictly administration. That's what I am. I'm an administrative level 2 peace officer. If we choose to have a bylaw officer, they need to take the same training as our CPOs as well. So we're training them same as a CPO, but we're going to run a lesser program. And there's some challenges there because of our pay with the contract and precedence on what we paid our people when they were bylaw officers moving into a CPO in previous years, as well as for me, I'd have to run 2 separate programs. So what that means is I can't have a bylaw officer driving a peace officer vehicle. I can't have a bylaw officer in a peace officer uniform. I'd have to change all of my program material. So I'd have to run 2 separate programs. So that's why a lot of people are transitioning from the bylaw program to the CPO program. Edson included. They're moving to a CPO1 program currently. They're using us as a model, actually. Jasper, they're looking at it. Whitecourt's moving to a different model as well. So because of the changes that the province has laid out and the certifications that they're going to need to hold, that's why it's not really, the bylaw programs are going by the wayside for that. So it's a lot about the training, where we have to send them to get training, how often it's offered. And I did look into the recommendations that M&P put forward as far as contracting out. I don't know of any CPOs or any program or businesses that contract out CPOs. People want to move to areas like Canmore and some of those other places. So it's easier to attract some of those CPOs at the latter part of their year to do some casual, but to move to Hinton for a year temp position will be, I think it'll bring us more challenges up front than we currently have.
I had Mayor Michaels and then Councillor Magoo, or Councillor Waugh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In hearing, I think there's a lot of synergies in the room right now. Our CAO just said there is an unusual deep pool right now. That's because our province is in a form of a recession. There are a lot of people looking for jobs, albeit it's difficult, or maybe more difficult. I think there's an opportunity right now with a deep pool to get a contract position. And no one, if we can get no one to come to Hinton, maybe we reassess in 2 months, right? We can direct administration to go on a contract position until August 31st of 2021 and cover the difficult season right now and next year's, and be prepared. If we're gonna go permanently to 2, we had a trial run of 13 months, and right now people are looking for jobs. So I see that as an opportunity. And to tie it to Councillor Magoon's point, that gives us potentially 13 months or whatever the will of council would be, if that's the route we choose, to direct administration to get a report on service levels, what they would look like under 2 people. Because as Councillor Nelson said, we've never seen that. So that would be the adjustment of hours, different jobs, and then we would have to be creative potentially on points of changing different job titles, potentially. There are a multitude of things we can do. I just, without that information of knowing what we're going to trade with service levels, I think the contract route is the most sound route. We're protected and we're good during COVID right now. We don't change our service levels, but yet we can make an informed decision in 2021 to go permanent or not. So I'd like to flip the scope. I'd like to get away from having a third permanent right now without the information on the service level, go contract. And if it's so strong and we're compelled to go with a third permanent, then we will make the motion to direct administration to have a third permanent. But without that information, I feel like we're attacking this from the wrong point. So I think there's a lot of positive from this conversation. And I would support a contract position to tie us into a better position or a better decision-making position in 2021. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Waugh, and then Councillor Magoon.
I'll waive mine for now.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, I'm so close. I think we're all very close on some of these points. I think I'm willing to push a little bit harder though on this next year, coming into the 2021 budget process. I think for myself, by keeping that, I absolutely hear what you're saying about contracting the position up until the next budget. That being said, I think there's a certain amount of opportunity, pressure, to leave that position unfilled for the remainder of the season, to see what does that, for myself, we had a sidebar conversation about, emergencies and the role that CPOs play in our community as it relates to bylaws. I don't see anything emergent about trying to really force these service levels into an efficiency finding position, given the fiscal reality that we as a municipality are in right now. And given the municipal's fiscal realities facing things like COVID, I'm really okay. I know it's not ideal, but I think there's an opportunity here that I don't want to lose. And I'm looking at the potential cost recovery of not filling that position for the remainder of the budget. Is that ideal? No. Does that put pressure on our staff? I absolutely acknowledge that it does. But I think this is, it's trying to find a little bit of positivity and efficiency building within the organization. Is, at the expense of pressure? Yes, absolutely. Too much pressure? I don't think so. Not from anything that I've heard so far. I'm absolutely fine with administration having a conversation with council to say, you've told us to scale back. So what are you comfortable with? I'm great with that. Let's have that conversation. But I think we could use that funds to recoup some of the losses that we've had to suffer as a municipality over the last year. And I would hate to see that go away by simply contracting out the position, in the meantime. So I'm not sold on that. I'm just sort of airing that thought out there to see what your thoughts are. So there we go.
C. Olson, and then Councillor Waugh, and then Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to add in kind of an additional concern. There's the CPO, the third CPO position, in place to alleviate some of those pressures on time and the CPO officers being on call 26 weeks out of the year, that sort of thing aside. An additional concern that I would have, and this really comes down to whatever decisions made, messaging it and communicating it well to the community is that should hours be reduced or certain areas of enforcement be adjusted, or basically the impact that's felt by the community, is that public perception and satisfaction with that service. And that reflects poorly on administration and on that area too, when we're looking to improve our reputation and to improve our customer service in a lot of different areas. So just to be aware that if this is supported by council, we'll really have to be clear that this is an intentional decision, and make sure that the community understands that there may be a trade-off. So there may be some financial benefit, but there will be an impact to what they see and receive from that department. And that's not reflective of the intent of them to do their jobs, but just on the reduction of service level, I guess. So I just wanted to bring that up. I know we've talked a lot about the impact to our people themselves. That can be adjusted through hours, whatever. They can take a look at that. However, the impact and the damage that can be caused to the reputation of that area of our business, we just need to make sure that we're assessing that and understanding what needs to happen to mitigate some of that.
Councillor Waugh and then Councillor Riggs.
Yeah, I'd like to put a direction up on the board, please. That committee direct administration to fill the vacant community peace officer position, a 12-month contract with the expectation that the town return to 2 full-time community peace officers only when that contract expires.
Almost.
You did well there. Return to 2 full-time community peace officers only when that contract expires. If I could speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
This is assuming that this is doable. I respect the fact that administration said that this might not be doable, but considering that there is a deep pool of candidates, maybe we can get someone here for a year. I'd rather try that than go the direction that's being suggested in that going cold turkey to just 2 community peace officers, because I do agree with CAO Wilson. I think we owe it to the community and to ourselves and to administration that if we are going to reduce it back down to 2 peace officers, it should be done so in a way that allows for proper communication and a full understanding on our part of what those service reductions may be. So this is kind of the compromise I'm looking to put out there, because again, I didn't support a 3rd full-time CPO, but I don't support us going cold turkey down to 2 CPOs without some sort of transition time. So that's where I sit. Okay, thank you.
CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to kind of jump in here, and I will defer to Ms. Hogan, and she's had her hand up. The contract versus temporary is a big deal, I guess, through our collective bargaining agreement, and may not be possible. So I'll just maybe hand the floor over to her to explain.
Actually, I have a point of order on it. Is this something that could be made in standing, or should it be committee recommend council? And with this, it actually potentially changes how I would vote on it as well. So I just have that clarification on the procedural side.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waugh.
I would defer to someone who knows more than me on the procedural aspect.
CEO Olson.
Yes, so this direction would need to come to regular for approval.
Okay. So committee direct council.
Committee recommend council direct.
Administration.
Thanks for entertaining that.
Please. Thank you. Is that where you were in the queue?
No, you can leave
Okay,
it in the queue.
okay. So Ms. Hope had something to add?
Yeah, sorry. I want to make sure that we're using the right term here. If you guys mean a temporary employee, that's someone that we hire that has a start date and an end date. That we can do in the collective agreement. But if you guys are talking contracting out and having a contract, then we have to find a CPO with their own business. We're hiring that business and we're actually contracting out work that's done by the employees, and that's a violation of collective agreement. So there's a real big difference between a contract and making it a temporary position.
Would be open to any changes that keep us in compliance with our collective agreement.
So 12-month temporary. Okay.
Position.
So I had a couple of people raise myself and Magoon in the queue before this direction. So now I've got Councillor Nelson and myself on this direction. So Councillor Nelson? Oh, sorry.
I could still,
You can still
this
speak?
applies, absolutely.
Okay.
So I guess related to this, if administration as a point of information can just clarify, what is the potential cost savings for that 12-month, 105,000 as it's currently budgeted for?
I'm not sure if this is a number that either Mr. Martins or Ms. Hope has at their fingertips.
If I may, it's on page 31 of 83. The table we're provided with was the 2020 operating cost implications of $105,432. I'm just wondering if that's
which package are you on? The new one
Can I
today?
speak to that?
Yeah.
Sorry, so that, yeah, there's the operating cost, there's as well the fine revenue, and then the overtime savings that would be factored in. So looking to Mr. Martins or Ms. Hope to clarify that that's the 105 would be then less those amounts.
Mr. Martins?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the council. Exactly. So that would be the reduction of the overtime. When we currently had two, we were around between that $30,000 and $40,000 mark. I think year to date, we're only at about 3,200 in overtime. So that cost is in there, as well as the fine revenue that they bring in. So the total that position actually would cost us, you see, is right there. It's $40,000 a year with the overtime and that cost. That's what we normally would pay out after they would bring in the fine revenue and the reduction of overtime. So it would be a savings of $40,000.
if I may, Mr. Chair. And this, not trying to be oppositional, but from that same point of view, the reason I can't support the contracted, or pardon me, the temporary position for the 12 months is that in addition to saving on the position for 12 months, is that one of the directions coming out of council when we're looking at how do we reduce services is to stop the overtime wages. So I mean that, I hear what you're saying, Chief, and I absolutely agree with you, but council still has an avenue to save that same money while looking at service reductions. And that's not an insignificant amount of money that we have the potential to give a trial run over the course of the year, decide if we like it, and then come back to it in the following budgetary year. So speaking to the motion at hand, I can't support it. I think I don't think there's a lot of danger in trying the cold turkey approach, as Councillor Waugh suggested. Obviously we disagree, but I think it's something that we can do, and it's a calculated risk. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson, and then myself, Mayor Michaels, and then Councillor Waugh. Oh, you're in there too? Okay. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think when we added this position just under a year ago, we really had no understanding of the financial realities of facing the town of Hinton for 2020. I don't think there's any more clarity at this point of what 2021 will bring, understanding that COVID happened this year and there will be significant short, medium, and long-term implications of that. To me, we have an opportunity through attrition to basically put on pause something that we probably didn't have the right information at the right time when we made the original decision, and we're able to now make a more sound decision from a much better footing if this waits until the 2021 budget. We have no idea what is in store for us for 2021. It could be really, really tough, and I would much rather eliminate a position with nobody in it and add it when we have the budget, rather than eliminating a position that has been in place for a matter of 2 to 3 months. So to me, this just puts us back to probably ground zero where we should have been when we made the decision the first time. And we now have the opportunity, knowing we learned last year that making a decision when we did probably wasn't the best at the time in hindsight. And now we can kind of do it better this time. So I won't support this motion, but would absolutely support one that puts it on hold pending a decision in the 2021 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I have myself, and then Mayor Michaels, Juan, and Councillor Stashik. The way the motion reads, I can't support it because I might support potentially a temporary position. I don't want to go this cold turkey route either, and I don't believe. I think the numbers speak for themselves, and the amount of the people are requesting this service more so than ever that we've seen in the past. And I think that taking away that not only impacts the community and the people that are utilizing this, but it also impacts the current staff that we have, potentially the loss of them completely. I see that happening with the burnout of it, unless, the amount of bylaws that we're asking them to cover, we have set the service level. Unless we're going to change that, I think it clearly states that a third one is needed. I can't support this one because I don't see going back to 2. If it was separate, and look at maybe the temporary position with a deeper look at the service level. And if we want to have the conversation about reducing the service level, great. But that's not in this motion or in this direction. It's to go with the contract after 12 months, then back to 2. And I can't support this direction the way it's worded because I don't feel confident in that our community can only have the 2. I think we've proven that over and over again. And I think just based on what Mr. Martin said too, with the standards the province has set for that position, the amount of training that's required, the notion of bylaw service people are going back to the dinosaur and we're going to CPOs. So I just can't support the way it's worded. So thank you. Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the principle of not having the service level a conversation on what 2 would look like, meaning the adjustments on overtime and things of that nature, I'll support this motion. I think it's a softer landing, but I will also support, if this fails, doing it through attrition and then tying it to the 21 budget. I just feel this is a little bit of a better landing opportunity in order to make that final decision. Because again, I don't know what that service level looks like with two CPOs or CPOs. So for that reason, I'll support this. But if it fails, like I said, I'm looking forward to another direction from council. Thanks.
Councillor Wong and then Councillor Stashik.
Yeah, just briefly, just with regards to Councillor Boone's comment, I think the COVID is a two-sided coin there. There are some financial uncertainties that this could present some savings, but to me, I think there are it's caused a much greater burden on the community peace officer force we have. They've had some enhanced duties related to COVID. We don't know where COVID's going in the next number of months. That's another reason why I'd like to keep this buffer just in case. So, but ultimately getting to where you want to get, and that is a two-level community peace officer force. So, thank you. Just speaking briefly to COVID.
Councillor Stashik.
I think Chief Martins.
Oh,
wants to
sorry.
make some comments, so I'll defer.
Okay, pardon me. Thank you. Chief Martins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to council, I guess my concern, if we talk about service levels with the 2, it's the report you have in front of you. It's minus the third position. Unless council gives me specific areas and stuff they would like to see cut, that's what they're going to be doing with 2. Plus add $36,000 for overtime back into the budget, less revenue from the third position. So that's basically what it is. No coverage on the weekend, no coverage in the evening after a certain time. That would be 2 CPOs. What I have in the literature now, that would be done unless council would give me specific direction on a reduced level for 2 people. Then I would have to come back with exactly what I would cut, because I don't know at this point. Everything they do is in their scope on what they can do. And some of the problems we had when we had a bylaw officer was we were paying them what the contract dictated, and they could only do X, 10 things. When we went to the CPO program, they can do 25 things. We had marked vehicles and we had complaints. Why weren't we dealing with things? They didn't have the authority to deal with it. So this gave us the authority. So basically what we have now is our program with 2 CPOs.
Thank you. Councillor Stashik.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could ask to see the motion again, please.
Sweet, thank you.
Thank you. So I can't support the motion the way that it's worded. If the intention here is to create a transition period towards moving towards 2 CPOs with no opportunity to have service level discussion, what the community is comfortable with, what the council is comfortable with. If the only purpose of the motion is to just create that transition period or a soft landing, as I heard someone else say earlier, I can't support it. If it was a 12-month temporary position with the intention to revisit potentially making it a permanent position based on service level discussions and what we're comfortable with, what citizens are comfortable with, what administration's comfortable with, then I'd be happy to support it. But the way that it's worded now, that it's just a 12-month transition period with the termination and switch to 2 CPOs, I can't support it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I have myself included in, and I think, thank you, Mr. Mertens too, because this is actually the first actual service level report that we got on this program. And I'm happy to see it. And I appreciate the fact, Mr. Mertens, I mean, we do have in front of us that service level, and we've seen it work how it worked in the past and the concerns. We have that report that came from MNP as well, supporting the potential for that third person. We as council decided upon that. Despite, yes, we've had budget changes, things like that, but it doesn't change the service level. And I'll go back to, again, same thing as Councillor Stashik said. I am not prepared with this motion. One, I think to tell someone you have a 12-month temporary program that you have no option for, a permanent position. I don't feel very confident that pool will change. I think they'll come in and then we train them potentially, and then after 12 months, where is our investment? We don't get any out of that. So I'm not comfortable with, saying with the way this motion is worded. I don't feel comfortable that we can go back to a 2-1 with this service level. And if we don't have that discussion, we're just going to leave it that way, then yeah, I can't support this either. If it was looking at a temporary position with that service level potential to be permanent or not, depending on that conversation, maybe, but not the way it's worded. Thank you. Council, I have no one else in the queue. Councilor Reese, you were on the queue before this direction. Do you have anything on this direction?
Well, thank you, sir, very much. I cannot support this. I could support it if the last portion of that paragraph was taken out and reflected more of what Councillor Ostashik would say. But as it is right now, I cannot support it.
And if I may, I think this is, to me, this goes way outside of we've had no consultation, no engagement with the community on the fact of we have 3 and now we're going to go to 2 and haven't had that conversation. To make this direction without having that conversation yet and to let the public know what that is going to look like and the potential for services, we're just saying that 12 months you've got to 3 and then after that, that's it, we're done, we're down to 2. And I don't feel comfortable with at all with this direction. Without any of that engagement of the public. So, all right, Councillor Wong.
No, just to respond to that, we put it up to 3 from 2 without conferring with the public much at all. So just a counterpoint to that, but I do concede that it would be a reduction in services.
All right, so no one else in queue, then we're gonna call this one to question. The committee recommend council direct administration to fill the vacant CPO position on a 12-month temporary position with the expectation that the town return to 2 full-time CPO only when that term expires. All those in favor? And all those opposed? And that is defeated 5-2. Let's get the 2 4s, did you get that? The 2 4s were
Correct.
Mayor Michaels and Councillor Wong. All right, Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction that committee recommend council hold the 3rd currently vacant community peace officer position pending a decision in the 2021 budget. I'm not going to speak to it much. I think we've all kind of expressed where we stand on this. I just want to know where we stand with the budget before we lose an opportunity to have some savings. Last week, I think council heard about us being at $500,000 in unrestricted reserves that, you know, we added 115,000 to that. And there's a lot of things that we've got to figure out for the budget. And this is something that could provide an opportunity. We could be in a really good position to approve this at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Council? Councillor Stashik?
So this is a motion that I think I can get behind. I can support this. It's going to mean some short-term suffering, but at least we can have a holistic conversation about the budget as a whole, including service levels and what's going to happen if this third CPO isn't added in relation to how it affects all of the rest of the budget for 2021. So that's a conversation I would look forward to having, despite the fact that it's going to leave us shorthanded for a little bit here until the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik, and I have myself next. With some reluctancy, but I realize I can get behind this. I'm confident that administration, we haven't even started our conversation about the budget, and that there are other areas that I'm sure that are going to be coming forward that maybe either cost savings or whatever that might be. So I could support this because knowing too that coming forward is a potential service level review and kind of taking a look at things and having a better conversation as a council about that and then what it looks like. It also gives an opportunity for we as councillors to hear from our community, you know, their thoughts on going to or, you know, having, and also I guess knowing too what kind of impact it has to having the 2 in this short period of time might be also helpful as well. So it's not ideal for me, but because I would like to see that third person, but I could support this as well. Thank you. Mr. Reyes?
So, thank you, sir. We may not see anything until next year then on this. Well, you know, unfortunately, I cannot support this. I could not imagine being one of those 2 people trying to enforce bylaws in this town. If I was one of them, I'd be so nervous that one of them might get sick, the other guy. And then I'm doing this all by myself. So I cannot support this.
Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be in support of this. And it doesn't preclude us from having a conversation moments after this motion is either passed or not. Well, especially if it's passed, to talk to the fire chief and administration right now on if there is burnout with 2 CPOs doing these service levels. Let's change some of them today. We can change the hours. Our fire chief is asking that there is burnout. We don't want to burn out our staff. So then we have to make service level decisions as a council. And then, so I think there's a lot of opportunities. There's short-term pain, as some councillors have alluded to, but we have an opportunity to minimize those pains right now or on August 18th or 25th if we want to revisit it. But this is, I think, an opportunity. But thank you.
May I
Councillor Reyes?
respond? You know what, if I knew that we would have that conversation with Chief Martins to make this work with two CPOs, then I probably could support this. But it worries me having two people do that job. And should one get sick, should one have to leave, it's a worry. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Council, I have no one else in queue. Councilman Goodwin.
Yeah, just to follow up on Councillor Reyes' comment, I'm following this motion. If it's, if it's supported, I'm more than happy to put forward a direction requesting administration to bring back a service level discussion to a standing committee, because I think that's what I heard Chief Martin say, is that has to be discussed, right? It's not as simple as saying, well, we have two, now just walk away from it. There's a lot more to it than that. Thank you.
CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for that service level discussion, what would need to happen now is prior to that discussion coming forward about, I guess, prioritizing elements of the job duties and whatnot would be an elimination of the overtime weekend and evening almost immediately following this moving forward. That's a service level impact that we're already seeing right now with only having two. There isn't any direction provided to any of our town departments or divisions to deny any essential service workers their vacation at this point. So as Chief Martins mentioned earlier, there's a lot of bank time, vacation time that's been building through the COVID response. Without knowing what's going to happen as our numbers climb, we could see more of that. We could see, and I don't know where their numbers sit right now as time moved, but we could see a reduction down to one for portions of the rest of the summer and through to the fall. So just making sure that council's aware that though there is a service level discussion that can happen, at this point, we're not looking to incur costs through overtime. And so some of those scheduling decisions would have to be made almost right away, pending the vote.
Thank you. CEO Olson. I have no one else in queue. Council, is there any other discussion? Councilor Reyes.
Thank you, sir. What support do we get from the RCMP when, after, on all hours?
Councilor, CEO Olson.
So Chief Martin spoke to this a little bit earlier. The RCMP prioritize their calls. Municipal bylaw infractions, if they're not posing a danger to people or property or violating some of those provincial acts, are not prioritized as high. So depending on what it is, if it's a loose dog or whatnot, it would wait until Monday morning if it's off hours. So it wouldn't be responded to in the same prioritization as the CPOs would.
So they would take a look at it, and there are some calls that they probably would handle.
Just depending on the nature of what's at stake.
Thanks, thank you.
All right, council. So we have, Mr. Martins, pardon me. Sometimes just throw yourself out there, please, if I don't see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through your council. So just some of the things that I think council needs to also be aware of before you guys move forward is when we talk about the service level and what that means to our citizens for some of our bylaws, and a good portion of of their role is that animal control portion. So that means moving forward with no overtime in the evening and on the weekends. An individual that has caught a dog, or we have a dog in our SPCA, that animal will not be released until the next business date, or possibly even for 3 days. So that's a good majority of our complaints is, I'm here to get my dog. Well, unfortunately, we have nobody working. You have to wait 3 days. And we're getting a lot of pushback already saying, well, I used to be able to get my animal and now I can't. And I would just hope that then council would support us on that and we put out the proper communication on that these are the hours and it is what it is.
Councilor Wong.
Just speaking to what Chief Martin said, I would hope we would as well. You know, it's what I've said from day one is we need to own this as a council, whatever service levels we impose through budgetary decisions. So I plan on doing as much as I can to get the word out.
Thank you, Councilor Wong. All right, seeing no one else in queue, I'm going to call this one the question then. The committee recommend council hold the third currently vacant CPO position pending a decision in the 2021 budget. All those in favor? And that carried unanimously. Thank you. So I'm gonna call a 10-minute bio break and then we'll come back. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll check and see if it's necessary, but I'm not sure after listening to Emily if it's
I don't
needed.
know if I
If we
got
need
mine
it,
in
100%.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yeah.
So, besides being acting CAO, you are not also co-chair.
That was funny.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's hard to Trevor ignoring you, so.
What? What did I do?
I had looked at you for about. I looked at you for about, I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Oh.
And you're busy looking up at the board
Oh.
and you're doing what you gotta do, but just not, you know, Marcel's leaning back.
Oh.
So finally, like, next time I went to speak, is this?
throwback. All right, I'm going to call this meeting back to order. So council, any other matters on this? Councilor Magoo.
Sorry, if I could just get clarification from the CAO. Would you prefer direction from council requesting a service level discussion around the CPO positions and bylaw?
Seals.
I think it would be prudent to have that discussion, just to further clarify to the community the areas that they see a reduction. That can happen next month, so I'd be looking for some timeline direction as well.
Okay, Councilor Magoo.
All right, then I will need a little, I'll certainly be open to the date. I'm just gonna look at my calendar. So Heather, I apologize, I'll try and like to, committee direct administration to bring back a service level discussion regarding bylaw and the town CPO positions. Now I will just need some help with the date. Let's see here. I think I see standing committee scheduled for the 25th. Administration with the 25th of August be okay? Do we need more time?
If we can, so just without having a conversation with Chief Martins or Ms. Hope about bringing that in August, if we could extend that a little bit. To answer that question, if we could extend it into September just to give us, just in case, so that we're not going to go back through action pending discussion and requesting an extension.
Okay, on September 8th, 2020.
Was that a regular or just?
Standing. I guess I'll just leave that out there. If there's anybody that has any concerns or sees any issues, please let me know.
Councilor Hodson.
Yeah, no, I got you. I was looking at some of the date there, so, okay, and I got actually more, thank you. That's a good wave there. Okay, so I have myself and then Councilor Nelson and Councilor Stashik. I mean, I'm glad that this was brought forward as a direction, because I think, you know, as Chief Martins has pointed out, that this is going to definitely, and also SEALs, and be an impact to the service levels, that we have to own it as a council, to have that conversation, and where are we going to make those changes to the service level to make this work with the two in the meantime. You know, and hopefully, you know, we'll through that budget conversation, see how that works out and plays out. But we have to, without a doubt, make these decisions for administration and not expect administration to make those decisions. So, thank you. Councilor Nelson?
I'm fine to defer to CO also. I missed her hand up for a bit.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. I just, and I wanted to seek some, I don't know, direction or just some understanding with council, backing up to the comments that I made on overtime, weekend and evening. There's no motion or approval of that, but that's something that we'd be looking to do right away. So I guess as a related item to this, if there's some understanding or direction that council can provide, just to clarify that again with the community, that that's a decision that's related to the service level discussion.
Thank you, CEOs. Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, if you give me a little bit of leniency, I'd actually like to speak to, because it's standing, I don't think we could make a decision about overtime payments. And I think it has to be status quo until at which point this is approved at regular. Specific to the service level conversation, I guess my question would be, are we having that as part of the budget process, and where is that scheduled? Because if we're going to be doing that in the middle of September anyways, I would just as happily have this as part of that. I have no idea what it's going to look like for that service level day. But if that's already scheduled, I'd rather have it part of the bigger picture of service levels rather than a bunch of separate service level conversations on separate days. So, thank you.
Can you speak to that, Ciolson, or?
I might need time to reflect. I'm not entirely sure an answer to that question. I think having this conversation separately to me is okay, or is acceptable, as this is related to a decision that's being made not to fill that position. So it's less of an overview of service levels through the budget process and decisions being made further to that, I guess. It's decisions on how to manage the impacts of the decision not to move ahead with filling that position now. So we're looking at service levels kind of with a different intention, I suppose.
I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I need some clarification on whether I can make a decision about whether I'll support the proposed motion or not. So I would need to know if this service level discussion is regarding the impacts of the decision that was just made to have it come to regular. So just to paraphrase that, then is this about the fact that we only have 2 CPOs now moving forward? Or is this a service level discussion about the future of bylaw and CPO positions in the town of Hinton in general? So pertaining to 2021 budget, future positions, number of positions. I need to know what we're talking about here.
So Councillor Magoo, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my intention was that we making the assumption that this goes forward to a regular council, the subsequent direction, and it's supported, that we have to find a way to sort of deal with the fact that we don't have as many people as was originally planned for. That's the service level discussion I'm looking at having. I think the broader discussion that we would have would be part of the budget process in 2021, right? About 2 or 3 or 4, however many. I think this is to deal with the situation that we're currently in, having so much overtime, or pardon me, banked holidays, those sorts of things. So.
Stashik, do you have any further questions?
I'm good for now.
Okay.
Jump back in for now. Thanks.
You want to jump back in?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay. So.
I'll wave you down.
Okay, yeah, wave me down. So from I have myself and then Mayor Michaels, and I mean to two things. One, I would like to have that conversation sooner rather than later, and have that, because this is in my idea. The intent that I thought Councillor Magoon was going was this was specifically, we're putting on hold the third CPO. We now have to have that discussion. We're going forward until that 2021 budget discussion is made, whether the future is of 2 or 3. But in the interim, right now, we've got 2 people, and we need to have that service level discussion, and we as a council, and so I would be in support of that sooner than what the rest of service level discussion we're going to have for the budget process in the bigger picture. So Mayor Michaels and Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this is a bit convoluted now, but and I agree with Councillor Nelson that at standing we shouldn't be making those decisions specifically that have impacts, but there's nothing that precludes our administration to make adjustments on the fly all the time, right? So without speaking to it though, administration is going to take the last motion and make adjustments. Just like if somebody's sick, we're one bylaw person, our services change all the time, right? So until we have that conversation, I just want to make it clear, it's in the hands of our CAO to overlook what services will be put forward. Is that a fair way to look at this?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and that's something we've been managing while having to with the paternity leave and vacancy at this point. What I was more looking for was just that there was an understanding amongst the people at the table that this will continue, or this may be a longer term impact of a reduction of hours and reduction in service level prior to any conversation around specifics within that the job duties.
If I may. Yeah. So my train of thought to Councillor Stasic's question for clarification on whether it's for now or whether it's for the next year, I'm kind of the mindset it's for both, but more so for 2021. How, like, do we want to have a service level conversation in the middle of budget time that differentiates, 2 and 3 CPOs? To me, that's the conversation I was looking for, a long-term decision. Let's hash out what two CPOs look like, what 3 CPOs look like, how it's going to affect us in 2021 to make a good decision in November, December for the budget. That information is also good for right now too. That'll allow us to say, hey, in the month of October of this year, based on that meeting on September 8th, we give new direction to administration, outside of what Ms. Olson is doing, to minimize the impacts of only having 2. So I don't know how to phrase it, but I hope that conversation could be of benefit and the scope would be big enough to include 2021. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Wong?
Actually, Mayor Michaels pretty much spoke to everything I was thinking as well.
All right, Councillor Stashik then?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm still torn about this. Honestly, I think next week when this comes to regular and a decision's made, if administration needs some direction on how that's to be achieved, to me it has to happen next week. We can't wait till September 8th. They have to go without direction until September 8th, which means at least September 15th before a decision's made on it. That's 2 months, and that only leaves 3 months left in the year for them to operate once direction's given. So I don't really see the point. It's either a direction to administration that you have 2 CPOs to work with and you have budget to work with, make it work. And then we can have a discussion later on about what the impact was in the community, what citizens thought about it, what council thought about it, what administration thought about it, and use that to color the discussion that happens about budget for 2021. Or we give some direction next week and say, this is where we want you to cut and this is what we don't want you to touch. I think ultimately that's it. I don't really see any point of pushing off a decision for 2 months to give some direction on how to implement the decision that will be made next week. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stashik, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Stashik, for saying that. Unfortunately, our next regular is August 18th, but I would support some form of high-level options from administration at the August 18th meeting in order to make those official changes that the CAO is going to do anyway. So let's tie them in together. I don't think it's that hard. If we're going to do those changes, they're going to be effective tomorrow, as Ms. Olson said. Like, they're going to be doing them. So let's add that to the August 18th regular meeting to the previous motion, and give that direction and own it, or whatever term you want to use, saying that hours will be this and this temporarily, because this is going to be revisited during budget time, and these are going to be the impacts. And I don't see a reason why we can't have that on August 18th at a high level in order to tie it together. So thank you.
I guess just as a point of clarification, it was my understanding that the request for a September confab came from administration.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know better than administration on how to do their business if they're asking for time until September.
CEO Olson, and then,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's true. We were looking just as a buffer, but hoping to bring something prior to that. I'm without having a sit down with the team to figure out what's doable. There was just a bit of a buffer that was requested. We could potentially bring something very high level to August 18th meeting. It would be based off the information that you see in this report, with some suggestions or recommendations, or to be basically just to support council's conversation a little bit further. So not a whole lot of rework of this information. If there's anything specific that council wants to look at, or any areas of the CPO position that you may be more interested in, we request maybe some of that direction up front. But to have a high level conversation to support that through council repurposing what's in this report could potentially be achieved.
Thank you. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so that brings me all the way back to my original point when I asked for clarification on what the motion intention was. If it's going to be a discussion about service levels moving forward, I don't really want to have that in September. I want to have a holistic service level conversation about all the services that the town offers, because any decision you make to raise or lower service level in one department has to be offset in another department unless we're going to change the budget, the amount of money that we collect through taxation. So to me, that conversation has to happen all together. And I'm not for having any piecemeal conversations about service levels about any departments, not just protective services, any of the departments. I want it to be a conversation about all of them together and how it affects the budget and how that budget affects the other departments if we make changes to one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Councillor Magoon is open to a friendly amendment for being so courageous earlier, I think if we can change the date to August 18th and add high service level discussion. High level service discussion, correct. Would you be amenable to that?
Very amenable.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Thank you.
High level service level?
No, that's why I caught high level service level, okay, high level.
Service discussion.
Service there.
No.
That's why I was hesitating.
Sounds like a policy.
That's good, yeah. Councillor Magoon, are you?
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Stashik.
Yeah, so if I could ask for clarification one more time. The intent of this then is to give administration direction on how to move from now until December 31st until the budget hopefully is passed January 1st. So just to clarify, that's the intent. Okay, thank you.
If I may, yeah, Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. Just further clarification for my understanding from the budget perspective. Based on your previous direction, if that comes back to regular, and what I would expect to happen then is that administration would have to work bringing forward a budget that only included 2 officers, and we would have to bring you decisions that would have to be made to make that happen. So in order to offer 2 going forward, these types of services would be cut. And the conversation for the preliminary budget discussion is targeted for August 25th. And I think in part of that, what you'll see is the schedule of events for the budget discussions, highlighting service level conversations, budget, departmental budget conversations and things like that. So you'll have a better understanding of how those things are being moved forward. I just wanted to add that for clarification.
Fox.
Yep. Sorry. If I can address Ms. Fox directly.
Yes.
Did you say that you would have to prepare a budget that qualifies only 2 CPOs? If I may.
Yes, please.
Because if the recommendation from administration is to have 3 CPOs, why can't that be the budget that's presented to council?
Thank you, Chair. Through to Councillor Stashik, I'm having a vague recollection of what the previous motion is.
Previous motion, the committee recommend council hold the 3rd vacant CPO position pending a decision in 2021.
Okay.
So thank
My
you for
mistake,
that
yeah, my mistake. Good clarification. I was feeling that the previous motion said we had to have 2 CPOs. So based on that discussion, or based on that, then obviously we would have to have further discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're welcome. Thank you for that clarification. All right, council, any other that are going in the queue? All right, then we'll call this one to question. The committee direct administration to bring back a high-level service discussion regarding bylaw and the town CPO positions on August 18th to the standing committee meeting of council. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. All right, council, any other matters for this information item? Seeing none, then we'll move on to our second Maxwell Lake Bridge deficiency work for old section of bridge. See you, Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is an information item that's related to the replacement of the Maxwell Lake Bridge that took place in 2018. Part of the scope of work for that project included removal of the old bridge section that's partially submerged under the new bridge. The town has a limited time frame to comply with an Alberta Environment and Parks Code of Practice to remove this material before the winter frost sets in, which had to also take place after June 31st to comply with direction from the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans. The intent of this report is to provide an explanation of that work to council and the community and to prompt communications on this item, just to manage expectations of what's happening in that area. This work's coordinated through the Development Services Department, and Mr. Vanna is here to answer questions and support and answers to questions the council might have on this one.
Thank you, C. Olson. Council, any questions for administration on this information? Councilor Nelson.
I would like to move that committee accepts the Maxwell Lake Bridge deficiency work for old section of bridge report for information. And the only thing I would say is the more communication, the better on it, especially any types of surface disruption, i.e. The rig mats and things like that. I think the more we can get out of that ahead of time so nobody's caught off guard, we'll be in a great position. And I feel like this is something that in previous times likely wouldn't have come across this table for public discussion, and I appreciate that this is here, and it puts us in a way better position as council to be able to communicate with citizens and know what's happening before it happens. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Council, any other? Councilor Stashik?
I have a question before motion question. Okay. It's not directly related to the motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Report regarding the future of the ramp installation and access, stuff like that. Do we have any indication on when that report might be coming back to council?
Olson?
I would look to defer this to either Ms. Howard or Mr. Vanna for an update.
I would have too, but I can't see their face, so I thought maybe they might be looking. Ms. Howard or Mr. Vanna?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't hear the question.
Okay, could you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, and I'll rephrase it too, so it's a little easier to get in. So, part of the report on June 18th, 2020, council passed motion MD 1794 stating administration to halt town and ISL work with relation to the bridge, excluding the bridge steps, and bring back a report pertaining to options, including high-level costs, to standing committee meeting before the end of August 2019. I'm just wondering when that might be something that council would see, and if there's any reason that it hasn't been presented yet.
My understanding is that we're still waiting for some information back or some approval back from Alberta Environment. We're coordinating this work. Development Services is working with Community Services on this particular item. And so we're sort of just waiting until we get Alberta Environment's okay before we come back to council to have that discussion.
Clarify that? Yes. So that's the AAP approvals that we're all waiting on for maintenance of the Beaver Boardwalk and everything else, because it's relevant to this discussion as well.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Council, we have a direction. Any other questions on it? Right, then call to question, the committee accepts the Maxwell Lake Bridge deficiency work for old section of bridge report for information. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Any other on this matter? All right, so that brings us then to the end of our information items. We're going to move on to any urgent matters from council. So I'm going to start to my left here, Councillor Nelson.
I'm free, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, I shared this with a couple of councillors yesterday, but I'll bring it to the rest of council's attention as well. The golf course is sitting in quite a good position compared to how it has been in previous years. Really happy with some of the deals and management decisions that have been made so far. One of the things we're being asked to make a decision on, and it's not a insubstantial amount, is regarding a development on the patio, essentially to make it welcoming for hockey games as we enter the playoff season, but also other events. And it includes like the purchasing of patio equipment, fire pits, TVs, obviously mounting equipment, as you can imagine. The cost estimate is about $15,000. And seeing as we had a council meeting tonight, I just wanted to sort of just hear your thoughts on the matter before we move forward with my response. Personally, $15,000 starts to make me feel a little uncomfortable. I think it's a lot of money. I think as silly as it sounds, even bringing it down under 10 would make me feel a little bit better. But I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it. There's some issues I have, the fact that the mosquitoes are always out, and I don't know what kind of buy-in we're going to get from the community. We've tried to market that area before. That being said, I have a lot of confidence in Mr. Crawford's work. I think he's been doing an exceptional job marketing the facility and the deals right now. So just if you have any quick thoughts on the matter, I'd be very happy to hear them.
Councillor Stashik, and then I have myself as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's okay, if you're not giving away anything proprietary, has there been any strategy discussed around revenue generation and how that can be achieved through spending this $15,000?
Yeah, and sorry, Mr. Chair, if I may. I think primarily you're looking at, with any F&B, it's primarily, your biggest seller or gainer is, of course, your alcohol. But it's not just for this year, it's over subsequent years. Like the idea is buying materials that have a longer lifespan, things of quality that will last, and the elements that can be used in other years as well, and trying to build a culture of having people come out to the patio just who aren't just golfers, but people from the community who will come out and see it as a place to go and watch the game or watch other sporting events, that sort of thing.
Okay, I can follow up. Yeah. So it's basically just a business plan to kind of convert it to a sports bar model with an outdoor viewing, patio suitable for outdoor viewing. Okay, thank you.
So I just have I see the outdoors maybe not the most, like, have they considered using the indoor, the large area, that they could use that area instead of, and I mean, the patio, I haven't been there a while, but the size of the patio, wouldn't make be able to get more people in this inside than outside?
To yourself, if I may. Yeah, absolutely. I think that was an area that was discussed, but the only thing I've seen quotes for so far are the patio. And in terms of organization, due to the size limits, it's basically to use the section of covered roof as a protection for the mounted TVs, where the right-hand side of the deck is looking down the length to the middle, and then at that same position is mirrored on the other side, sort of to maximize that space.
Thank you. Council, any other comments for Councillor Magoon?
Hey, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm planning on sending a response to that probably tomorrow. So if you want to take your thoughts and if you want to email them to me, I'm very happy to take that into consideration. Normally, this isn't something I would bring to council, but with a $15,000 touch, I think it's important to get your input given the considerations around that issue.
Okay, Councillor Wood.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'll offer something up. I've been pretty impressed with Mr. Crawford as well. They've done a pretty good job there this year. And so it's up to him to make the business decisions that he thinks will set them up for success. As a counselor, I think it would be great to have 1 year where we're not worried about a lousy August and a lousy September, sinking them for this fiscal year. So if they are ahead, I just hope that there's caution taken, that there's still 2-3 months left in the year, so.
Ms. Fox? Oh, Councillor Stacha.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Councillor
Okay.
Stacha.
Thank you, Chair, through to council. So just logistically, Ms. Way is the main point of contact for the golf course through administration. Some of my concerns, just with what we're talking about right now, is there's a transfer of assets. It's a facility capital upgrade. Has the board or the manager determined that this is not within their budget? If it's within their budget, it's their decision. However, they would have to confer with the town to change capital and enhance capital. So that gets worked out through the agreement and through a lease agreement, which is being worked on right now. So I'd say that without all the information in this regards, and I would defer this way, but we are not prepared to give advice on how to deal with this until we've had time to deal with it as administration. And as soon as we're aware of what the requirement is, if it's a budget request, a capital upgrade, we can advise council on the best way forward through this. If it's something that they believe that they can handle within their budget and still meet the requirements that they put forward, that's something that their board can decide. It's just that capital upgrade. If it's equipment, you know, they can consider that, but we have to consider the arrangement going forward as far as the agreement and what we're required to guide them on.
Thank you. Councillor Stacha.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's pretty much what my question was regarding to, is what mechanisms are there for oversight, considering that the town, that's basically a town facility now. So what's the oversight? What's the in terms of the capital assets, who owns them? Does the golf club own them? Does the town own them? Belong to the facility? So yeah, I would have quite a few questions about there, but I'm okay with, as long as there's some oversight and some reporting back and administration's aware of what's going on, and we'll make recommendations and pass that back to council. I'm fine with that for now.
Other than that, are you good, Councillor Lagoon? Anything other urgent matters?
Yeah, no, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Reese, any urgent matters?
Nothing to report, sir.
Okay, and Councillor Stacha. Okay, Councillor Wah, Mayor Michaels?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
And nothing for me as well. CEO Olsen, status report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to kick things off by thanking Ms. Wade for stepping in and filling in for Mrs. Anderson. She's on a much needed break, and typically our ledge clerk would step in to backfill. However, we have a vacancy there at this point. So Ms. Wade has stepped in to support us for this meeting and to support a few of those functions while Ms. Anderson is away. So I just express some thanks. It's a bit of a learning curve, and she's doing the best that she can. She's doing a great job, and we appreciate it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that off the top. The next item, council action pending list. It's in the agenda package. There aren't substantial changes or requests to revise or revisit any direction that's been provided. So the one change that I will acknowledge is again a revised date for that civic agencies discussion. That research is ongoing. We have kind of a change in admin who's managing that to bring it forward. So I want to make sure that we bring the best possible information to council to support a discussion. It'll still come prior to budget discussions and help to inform and facilitate those discussions with council moving forward. So just wanted to identify that. Otherwise, nothing material, I would say, as far as changes. So, and then process-wise, because there's no changes in direction, there's no need to bring this forward to council for approval. And Like we saw that previously, we were changing some of the direction and combining some items, and that required explicit approval. Otherwise, nothing further from me.
All right, thank you. And legislative services update? Nothing.
Not yet, looking to post shortly and get that position.
Excellent. Well, like executive assistant logistics information back there.
Everyone got their agendas
Oh, thank you, Ms. Way. All right, so council, I look for a motion to go in camera with a 5-minute break. Mayor Michaels?
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion to go in camera. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. So we'll see you in 5.
So to admin who's left on, you guys are going to access the invite that was sent for 5:30.
Just off
See
like
you then.
6 minutes.
A delay on this one, but it's loading right now.
Sorry.
Oh, that's what we did too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are live.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to call this a special meeting of council at 9:05. Council, any additions or deletions to today's agenda? Seeing none, I do have one request to change the order to do tax sale auction 111 Scooter Drive number 1, CO contract and appointment number 2. And with that, I will accept a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Councilor Race,
Move to adopt
as amended.
as amended.
Thank you, Councilor Race. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. And with that, I will hand it over to our CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. So this was an urgent item that was added to the special meeting agenda yesterday as it was being prepared. And I'm going to ask Ms. Fox to take us through some of the pertinent information that was in that report. I'm hoping council had enough time to review and understand the process and the reason that this is urgent coming forward tonight based on some timelines. Looking at a tax sale or auction, it is a legislative process that has defined timelines that we need to work around. So that's why it's moving forward. The timelines for auction need to be completed by October 1st. And then with advertising requirements, backdating it, it was something that came about quickly and needed some swift action. So with that, I'll ask Ms. Fox to take us through anything that she'd like to highlight for council on this and the recommended action as well.
Thank you, Chair, through to council. And my apologies for the short notice and bringing this forward with the other things that I had coming forward, not realizing the time frame and the time crunch that we were under with this action item. What administration is required to do is to ensure that council approves the reserve bids in this process. There is a legislative requirement checklist that administration follows diligently, as if anything's missed, it negates the entire process and you have to start all over. So that is something that administration does follow through with and take very seriously. The tax sale process is outlined on page 2 in this regards. Typically, there's a number of questions around if this doesn't sell in tax sale, what happens? And the municipality has the option to transfer title to the municipality. At that time, they could consider selling it at a lower than market value or a different price, but under the MGA and through the tax sale process, you're required to set the sales price as close to market value as possible. Typically what happens are any of the proceeds go to pay off all the delinquent taxation and amount owing to the municipality. Secondly, anything to the crown. In this case, there's nothing to the crown, and everything else falls away. Typically, what we see happen in this case is banks or anything of interest move in to pay the delinquent taxes, because once the tax sale happens, everything else falls away. I guess at that, I think I'm gonna leave it and open it to any questions that you might have at this time. And as, just to clarify again, that this was brought forward as the timing for advertising is at least more than 40 days and working back in a timeline. Oh, the other thing I would add that I did forget to put in the report is that due to COVID, typically March 31st is the deadline for these types of sales and for this process to take place. But with COVID, the timeline was actually extended, just like in other areas. The province extended timelines for that process to October 1st. And that's why we're bringing it forward now, and it wasn't brought forward previously.
Thank you, administration. Council, any questions? Councillor Nelson.
Yes, speaking to the timelines, by changing it, it's the deadline for sale changed to October, but the 40 days didn't change, correct? We're not shortening the advertisement timeline, which could affect the sale. That would all stay kind of the same.
Correct. Yes, all the process involved is all the same.
Thank you, folks.
Council, anything further? Council Review.
I'm assuming the answer is no. Is there any complications if there are tenants or anything like that and I don't know the specifics of this. This is just me using Google Earth to get an idea, you know what I mean?
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. So there's 36 units in this property. If no one purchases it, so if somebody purchased it and depending on what they wanted to do, they could continue the business and continue those contractual obligations. They could change what they wanted to do. There could be some benefit there to that. If no one purchases it and the town decides to take title, you could have the rents come to the town to pay the outstanding taxes until such time as I don't think we want to be in that business. So we would try and sell it through that means and encourage somebody to take the business over.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Council, anything further? If not, I would entertain a motion. Councillor Hawes.
I'd like to make the motion that council approves the reserve bid shown on attachment 1 for tax arrears property 111 Muscuda Drive that will be offered for sale at public auction on September 14th, 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? And seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further? Councillor McGinn?
I'd like to make the motion that council approve the following sale conditions for the tax arrear properties that may be sold at the public auction. A, that a deposit of 10% of the purchase price be paid at the time of purchase, and B, that the balance of the purchase price be paid by September 18, 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Ragoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this item this evening? Seeing none, thank you, administration. And with that, we will go to our second item, CEO contract and appointment, and I'll entertain a motion to go in camera. Councillor Nelson.
So we're just, this is on the fly. What sections of FOIP? Because it wasn't listed as in camera on the agenda.
Me offhand, you're 17 and 24.
2 minutes here.
Well, it would be for Wendy. Monday, 4:13 p.m.
Just 24, if we can. That on the record.
I'd like to move that we go on camera.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. We have a motion to go on camera. All those in favor? And, all right, and this will be just with council.
You close down the
And
Zoom.